Good evening and welcome to Livid Comics Lair. Tonight's guest is a comic book artist and graphic designer. He's worked on books such as The Tick, Batman, Ninja Turtles, Elvira, and a whole slew of other works. He's also a graphic designer for over 10 years, has done everything from logos, branding, websites, and much, much more. Please welcome our friend, Mr. Ian Chase Nichols.
Hey, here we go.
What's up, everybody? Good evening. Happy Friday night.
Good evening to everyone. Welcome in and happy birthday to John.
Oh, thanks.
Yes, it's John's birthday. He's 19 again. It's amazing.
Wow, happy birthday, John.
Look at this.
It's a big one.
It's a young
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah,
Yep.
not that young, and I definitely don't feel it. Not with 2 kids at home. So,
Wait till you get to 40, buddy. It gets even worse. So, have fun.
yeah. But
That's it.
it is what it is. Hey, it's a good birthday present. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. We got Ian on the show tonight. This is really a big show for me because I'm gonna say, man, I think I was telling Ian, when we met at the shows, like The Tick and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are the books that got me interested in drawing comics. Like when I was 11, I think it was, and it's just like kind of come full circle here, like 30 plus years later, to have someone that's actually producing that product on my show. So it's kind of a great experience. So thank you, Ian, for coming on. I really appreciate your time tonight, and we're gonna have some fun tonight. So thank you for that.
Yeah, happy to be here, man. And I grew up reading
awesome.
The Tick and TMNT too, so it was, I don't think we're that. I think you're about the same age as my brother, so I think we're pretty close in age.
Yeah, I'll be 43 next month. I don't hide it, so it is what it is,
Okay.
right? So that's it. Yeah, it was great. I remember, my first experience with picking up The Tick was just my brother, who was 10 years older than I am, was dragging me to local comic book shops, and I was just, even at that age, I was really into indie stuff, and I just said, hey, who the heck is New England Comics, right? Oh, they're local guys. Oh, cool. Or, who the heck is Mirage Studios? Oh, local guys, right? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll support local guys. Even at that age, I was into that. So I picked up those books and things, and, I think I was telling you I would write to, like, Ben and, Eastman and those guys, are just fan mail when I was a little kid, and they were kind enough to write me back, but over the years that stuff has just vaporized with many different moves and things. So unfortunately, it's somewhere in the ethos. So I hope someone else is enjoying it at this point because it's out there. So yeah. What was that like for you, Ian, to go from being a fan of the book to actually being able to create the book? Tell us about that story a little bit.
Well, I mean, obviously you mentioned New England Comics is a store, and it's a local store, so it's not a large creative team, and it's people who work for the company there. So it's a relatively small group of people that have produced these books for a number of years, and they've always had 1 or 2 artists that they've worked with continually. So it was not a quick process of just showing up with my portfolio and stuff like that. I was shopping at the Quincy store for years. I lived in Quincy right on Squantum Ave for a number of years, and even when I moved to Jamaica Plain in Boston, I still went to the Quincy store because it was a great store. And, Tom and Doreen still work there to this day. And when I was in college, I actually put together a pitch because I was like, oh, I shop at New England Comics and I love The Tick. I should try to do something. And I did turnarounds. I did a full script. I did sample pages, and I took them to them, and they were the best efforts of a very enthusiastic 22-year-old. Not exactly what I would call probably professional work now, but I showed it to them, and they said, no, this is not good enough. And it was, but they did say that keep trying, keep putting together stuff, and keep bugging us. And eventually, I sat at a free comic book day next to Jeff McClellan, who was writing The Tick then. He was working with an artist named Dwayne Redhead, who's a terrific guy. He's done Judge Dredd, 2000 AD. He lives over in England, fantastic artist and guy. And Jeff just asked, hey, would you want to do a backup story? And I said, yeah, of course. Like, if there's ever an opportunity, even if it's one page, I would love to do it. And it was kind of like a deadline thing where they didn't know how many pages they had to fill. They weren't sure if they were going to have backup stories, but I did the 3 pages. We put them together, we sent them to them, and then it was like the wait to see if it actually gets in the book. And then, I continually make the story a bigger and bigger and more ridiculous lie every year. There's hidden bodies. There's going into the studio at night and changing printing plates to get the pages in. Like, depending on how theatrical I'm being at the time, you'll hear a more ridiculous story. But the real story is that they had 3 pages they needed to fill. We did these 3 pages on spec. They approved them. Whether or not it was like, if they had 3 other pages, maybe they would have used those. But I was very lucky in right place, right time. And Jeff, who is one of the nicest, on top of being a terrific writer in comedy and science fiction, he does a book called Planet Comics now. He is just one of the most trustworthy and nice people. And when you're starting to get into comics, you have to really meet as many people as you can. And when you get to meet really quality people, you hang on to them and you form really good friendships over the years. And he's one of those people that I'm just very thankful that I've met, because he's, we've worked together on numerous projects since then. We always help each other out in a deadline pinch. It's a collaboration that I genuinely cherish to this day. So that was how the first one got in. And then, I think there was a year between stories that I did for them, and it was another backup. And then I think it was another deadline thing that had happened. And NEC does basically, at this point, a free comic book day book, and then they do convention specials. And because I was local and they knew that I could be at the table, they had me do some of the convention specials. And then that was kind of where it started to snowball. They're like, okay, he's here, he hits his deadlines, it's good enough. And, we can do something with it, and we can, really, and at one point, they said, all right, let's go for the big one. They took me out to San Diego, and I actually got to meet Ben. I mean, I had never written Ben a letter like you, and I had never met him, but of course you see his name in the credits, you know that this is the guy. And, the first time I was there, I was obviously nervous as hell, but I showed him my portfolio, and he was very nice to look at it. And he said, you draw a good chin on the tick. That was the thing that he said. The chin that I draw is the right chin. And I looked over and I saw the art director, and he was a little shocked by it, I think. But, it was kind of like, this guy's okay. I think he gave me the, he can hang around a little bit and draw some stuff if you want him to. And I was just on cloud 9 for the next month. I draw good chins. Take that, world.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Ian, before you got into the industry, how was your approach? Are you a more do or die guy, or at the time you had a plan B?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I always wanted to do comics, from day one as a kid. Once I found out that human beings make these and that these are made by individual people and groups of people, I said, I want to do this. But I've always been very practical minded. So that's why, I always had other jobs until I had enough comic jobs to make that the job. It was a slow build. I was, when I first got out of college, I was teaching art classes and working at Michael's, and applying to jobs for graphic design. Because I went to college at a little Division III school in Massachusetts called Curry College. And I graduated with a degree in both art and English, because obviously you write and you draw pictures. It made sense to me. I played some baseball. That was what I did there. And, after I was at Michael's, I got my first graphic design job. But during all this time, it was working on comics nights, weekends, holidays. It was, the thing I had to do. And then I didn't expect my graphic design career to go as far as it did necessarily, because it was this is what I did to pay the bills. And then I ended up being a creative director at a book publisher in Boston. And I was there for a number of years. And that's where all the book credits you see on my website come from. Is they did textbooks, they did biographies, they did mostly nonfiction stuff. But, I worked there where they were putting stuff out. And, between my first graphic design job, which was at a print house, and then my second one, which was at a book publisher, I went from doing every step of the process of making a comic. Like I cleaned rollers and ran presses. I did pre-press, at the first job. I did graphic design. I did layout, typography. And then at the second one, it was distribution, ISBNs, knowing your various, we had to set up travel tours for authors, like going to bookstores across the country. Like it was, each one of these jobs gave me a different skill for me to bring into comics. And that was like really like where I was while I was not necessarily like in love with doing graphic design, I saw the value of learning all those skills and working with people who were in those industries for decades. And that's what they, made their bones out of for many years. But I still was still focused on like, I'm going to get to comics. It's going to happen. And, I'll just say it. It's a hard ass job doing comics. And it's a very, very small industry that's very, very difficult to get into. And it's a really it can, as you guys have a group, but it can be a lonely endeavor. Like Joel, how long are you at the desk just drawn by yourself or
oh yeah 30 hours a week or whatever, just stuck in this room, without leaving the room, right? That's 30 hours solid right here. So that's it. It's like
all three of us. I mean, Joel, Rogerio, and myself, like we have a group text and we're texting until 1-2 a.m. sometimes. It's like I sometimes will come down here to the basement to write because I try to do it sitting up on the couch, and then my wife keeps forgetting. She'll look over and start talking to me, and she'll be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're writing," and I'm like, "Yeah, I am." But so yeah.
What do you write on? Do you write on a computer, tablet, typewriter?
Oh, I write on a laptop. I bought a new laptop when I got my drawing tablet, and so I just write on that. So. But and then half the time I'm writing on my phone, which I don't prefer, but I'll do it wherever I can. We got the day jobs going. So if I'm sitting here between appointments with my day job and I don't have my laptop down here and I have stuff popping through my head, I'll open up the notepad and just make sure I get it in there. Or if I'm laying in bed, I don't care. I bought a massive screen because I just wanted a big screen for my laptop. I'm not going to lay in bed typing on this thing. It would light up the whole room. So so I'll just have my phone out, writing in the notepad, sitting there. And sometimes my wife will wake up and look over and be like, "What are you doing on your phone at 2 a.m?" I'm like, I got to do it. I'll forget it. So, but yeah, so the lonely thing is true.
It seems like all three of you guys have the drive to do it. So is that true for you? Like, obviously you have other gigs now, but you're still all the comics are labor intensive projects. So you guys are putting in the time yourselves.
Yeah. We have solid day jobs too, right? We make enough to provide for our families doing what we do. So it's a pure passion play. It's not like the starving artist situation, right? We're we got to get this done or we're not going to put food on the table. We're doing it because this is what we want to do, so,
and it's not just money. Like you guys got, I'm sure through your day job, you got health benefits, things like that to help take care of your families. So, there are other benefits to real jobs.
Yeah. You really got,
I love that expression.
Yeah, to your point, you really got to have that passion to fuel it, because after you've worked 8, 9, 10 hours at your day job, right now it's going to be another 6, 7, 8 hours at night. And then it's on the weekends too. It's like, if you're your own thing, it doesn't stop, right? So I don't think there's been a night so far that John and I have retired much before 1:30, 2 a.m. That's usually what we have. Then we're up at 6 or 7 to go, right? So it's a caffeine-induced wild ride of just trying to pull it all together and stuff. But it's a hell of a good time. So I think you run on adrenaline and, those endorphins and things. And it's fun as hell, man. And we get to meet cool people. So why would you not want to do that? So
well, the drawing and the writing is the fun part. Like when you're actually making the comics themselves, it's all the other stuff that's the work.
Yeah. Yeah, running a Kickstarter campaign, setting that all up,
Designing merch for the con was not fun, trying to get guys vector files and all that nightmare. And they're like, "Oh, your bleed is off." And I'm like, "Dude, I don't care. Just throw black in and run it. Just rip it." I don't know, I'm not that particular.
I don't know if Ian will agree, but there is something about when you get paid by doing what you love, it's something that means a whole lot of difference. I got my first gig, my first paid gig with those guys up here. And at the moment when I got paid for my first pages, when people ask me what I do for a living, I have other jobs. I say I do comics because it just feels right. I'm an illustrator for advertising comics, but I don't like it. It's all right. Of course, I love drawing, but I want my drawing to mean something. And as a creator, I think you would agree that when you get your first check, it's like a light bulb just lights up, and then you just realize that this is what you meant to be doing. I don't know if you agree with that.
I do, and it's just like even more so. Like I can feel your I don't necessarily know the word, but the unease with corporate comics, because I've had to do some myself where it's either advertising or it is for some sort of promotional gig, and like you don't have the creative freedom. Not only is it when you get paid to do something that you love to do, whether it's making comics, but when you get paid to do something you like to do, and then you get to do it how you think is the right way it should be done, and editorial supports you and your label supports you and believes in you. Like when I get that push too, and it doesn't happen all the time, like it just doesn't. It is like it's the drug that just keeps on going and it fuels you through like other projects. Like there were, even the most recent cover that I did for that Red Sonja comic, I just got to go for it, send in the thumbnail, the layout, it's great, go for it, add a little tweak here, and when you get the go and you have your momentum going and you feel good about your drawing and you feel like people are digging what you're doing, that's the good stuff. So
yeah, that's awesome. We were just talking about this recently the other day, where some of the bigger names, like in comics too, some of the bigger writers, like they're doing their own thing now. Like James Tynion and Scott Snyder, like they all are doing the Substack stuff. Like they're basically controlling their own destiny now for the most part. And so when you were talking about having to talk to like Marvel or DC, obviously, I mean, that's a dream job for a lot of people still. I'm not trying to say it's not, but I think having that freedom when you have the stability is huge too, right? So those guys are in a spot where they can do that now. But I don't know. I just wanted to, point that out. We were talking about that just the other day with those guys, how some of those bigger writers are doing their own thing now. So,
well, yeah, and they're actually, I give them credit going into creator owned. I think it's great, but they're also doing the exact same thing that previous creators have done. Like the Image guys all use the brands that they were recognized for to break off and do their own thing. I mean, and on top of that, they're all getting residual checks on their old work. So they have a baseline income that's going to show up whether those books succeed or not. And we want them to succeed and we want them to do well. I mean, at least I know I do. It stands to benefit all like independent creators, a rising tide and ships and all that stuff. So, and some of the books look great. I haven't gone deep into the Substack because I was reading the instructions on how to get all of the different tiers, and I got an ice cream headache. So then I'll come back to it for sure though.
Oh, it's confusing. Yeah, I signed up for Scott Snyder's Substack to do his writing class, and I was sitting there trying to look through like all the stuff, and I'm like, I don't really know what I'm looking at right now. Yeah, it's not like as easy as you'd want it to be in some situations, but
they'll work it out. I found the Webtoon stuff difficult early on when that first started, but now I think the user interface is great. Like, they're just really getting going with all this stuff. I saw that DC just dropped their first title on Webtoon, and it's got like 500,000 people following it already, like 300,000 people, which, if they sold that many copies of Batman, they'd be giving everyone a bonus.
Yeah, Webtoon's great. I never messed around with Comixology until we started doing a show because it was a quicker way to prep for guests that we had. So versus not being able to find, old copies of books that weren't in print anymore. But I was telling these guys how cool it is, because I'll be on my phone and it's almost like every panel is a page reveal because it zooms in on the panel. You have that capability and you're side swiping, so you really don't see what's coming on the page for every single panel. It makes it, to be honest, I actually kind of like the whole concept of that. But
Yeah, it's very cool what they're doing with digital comics, and I'm doing my best to try to keep up and always trying to learn the new stuff. It's moving very quickly, and I usually have to have some help. Even just getting into streaming and stuff, like I had to have a little bit of help, and just getting the right camera, the right software, like getting everything, because there are ways to do it, but you want to do it as well as you can. And there are people who have devoted their lives to knowing these things, and I'm happy to help the economy and pay them money to help me get better at this.
yeah.
How much, I know you're doing the writing and the art on these free comic book days. Is Ben still providing input on these, or is it kind of he's divorced from that, or is his hand still in the pot a little bit, or is it kind of your baby at this point? Or tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, I only actually wrote the one story you have there in the free comic day issues. Jeff McClellan's been writing most of the stuff, and I think we talked about it briefly at the show, where like Ben is pretty hands off at this point. The art director, Bob Polio, has been there since day one, and he's actually the guy that told Ben to not make the tick brown and to make him blue. Originally, Ben was going to make the tick brown, and he's kind of been like the person trying to keep the creative interest and the uniqueness of the tick all together. But we do see Ben, at San Diego, and I saw him at New York, I think, a couple of times. So like every year we'd see him, and he would kind of look at the stuff, and if he had notes, he would say something, and if something was egregious, I'm sure he would say something. And he's always generous with his time. There was one time when I saw him at New York, and it was just as I think season 2 was happening with the Amazon show, and everybody was asking about the Amazon show, but I'd had one question about the comic on my mind, because if you look at how I draw Arthur, it has changed significantly from the first issue to like the most recent issue. And that's because like I was drawing the bigger, heavier Arthur from the old comics, because that was, when I thought of Arthur, there was a little bit of that, the dancing hippos from Fantasia, like how does this guy fly? And that's kind of the funny gag. So I asked him like, why did you make Arthur smaller and skinnier? And he just said, well, we wanted him to look more like a sidekick instead of another hero. And I said, okay, and thus like I started to tailor it more to what you recognize. And, we had talked a little bit about where like differences in the different shows, and there's certain characters that we can use and can't use, because some of them are actually still owned by, I think now Disney owns the Fox stuff. So now Disney owns like, Deflator Mouse, American made, and some of the characters that they made specifically for the animated show. But any of the characters that showed up in the comics, we can use those pretty regularly, with the exception of the Red Eye, which they have kind of like saved. And I've always hoped that meant that like they're saving it for Ben because he has a plan with it, but I've never heard such things. This is just me dreaming. So
is Paul the Samurai maybe coming in at some point, or Man-Eating Cow, or any of those
yeah. Man-Eating Cow showed up in one of the specials that we did recently.
I got that one. Yeah, I didn't get that one.
And Paul the Samurai, during the Tick and Arthur comics, which were by Sean Wong, kind of became a detective, and he does show up every now and again. I've been trying to every now and again, like they have this giant like handbook of the Marvel Universe of all the Tick characters that they've done. And I'll just find like the most random characters in that and just try to get them to, let me make a joke with it or something, because like a character like Barry Hubris, the other Tick, the mean Tick that, is at the headquarters and stuff that doesn't like the other Tick. He has like 6 or 7 different aliases that he has used over the years. And I'd always wanted to do like one story where all the aliases show up at the same place and you have to explain why, like, and who they are and everything else.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. So. When they hand you a script, do they have like the visual gaffes written in that script, or do you have artistic freedom to kind of make up that stuff within that panel or that page as you like?
A lot of the times Jeff will like break down some of the beats, but as I'm, maybe you as guys as writers and artists can speak to this, is that, sometimes the actual real estate of the page does not match the words on the script. So like in order to, like, one of the most common ones on the planet is if you get a script and someone is doing multiple actions in that one panel. The tick walks through the door and sits on the couch. The only way to do that in one panel is with like a strobe effect where you see multiple figures, or to have him break through the panel. Like there are different effects, but a lot of the times that just really looks like you're forcing it. So in that instance, I will split up panels, I'll move things around, and if there's anything that we really disagree on, we'll talk about it. And then like it all comes down to what Bob and then George Suarez, who's been the publisher of the Tick since day one, they also have like editorial control. So there's plenty of times where they say, no, do it this way, or they'll rewrite some dialogue or something like that. Like that's just part of working for somebody else.
That makes me feel a little bit better as a rookie writer here, because these guys have both called me out on that a few times, where it's Ruggiero most recently, right? He'd text me and he'd be like, hey, you have this guy coming through the room or hiding in the closet and looking at this person, but there's no way to show that in a panel. Like we need to split the panels or do something different. So because I think when you're writing it, right, you picture it as like a scene in your head, and it makes sense when you're writing it down. And then when someone goes to draw it, they're like, that doesn't work, So, so how does he, when he provides the script, is it like page by page, panel by panel, like rough outline, like so
Yeah, and he'll include the dialogue, and if there's any sort of like emotional beats that need to be hit, if there's because when I get a script, the first thing I do is I thumbnail the whole thing. That's the first thing that I do from beginning to end, so that I have the whole flow and I can get a greater picture of the whole thing. And then I'll identify, depending, and this again comes down to your deadline, because I've had somewhere, there was one story for the Tick that I had to do so fast they wouldn't even tell me the deadline. They would just call me 3 times a day and be like, where are you at now? Where are you at now? Where are you at now? And but when I have the ability to do what I like to do, it's a full thumbnail, and then I can show that, and then they can say, this flow works, we don't like this flow, because that's what I like most about comics, like, is the actual graphic design and visual narrative aspect of storytelling. It's not like, I've done a fair number of covers, but I don't find that as interesting or as rewarding as the actual pages themselves. Sequential pages are like, they are the continuous puzzle that has infinite answers, and that's what I just love to continue to figure out and learn and study. And because you have so many of these great artists and writers that we've all been reading these comics for years, and some of them have put out material and books and how-tos and all kinds of stuff, and I've absorbed as much of that as I can. I'll ask questions at conventions, I'll do whatever, but it's as far as getting back to the script, when he gives me the beats, I'll do the thumbnails, then I'll do the pencils, and I'll do the inks on the same board, and then I'll scan them in, color it digitally, because they like that slicker look. And some places even require it. They'll say, like, you need to do this in Photoshop or Illustrator or Clip Studio. We prefer this color palette or these brushes or blah, blah, blah. So you have to learn all these different tools and be versatile depending on, which publisher or which project you're working on.
Okay, so everything up until the coloring's analog then?
Yeah, for me it is. I've done some digital work, like purely digital stuff, but it's just, to me, it's twofold. Like there's the, personal enjoyment aspect, but then there's also the financial aspect of having the original artwork that's there. That's what you lose with just going purely digital. And I know some artists do like a one-of-one print, but I don't see it having equal value. Some people do, and that's perfectly fine, but I don't. And I have, and there's plenty of collectors that I've run into, obviously, people buying my work. I collect original artwork myself when I can trade or buy stuff. So it's, there's the asset, and then there's also the physical act of making it, because I've been drawing on ink and paper since I was, 7 years old. So, doodling with little rollers on a notepad, we all started with something,
Yeah, Ian, when we look at your works, we see that you spend a lot of time planning your panels, because they are so very nicely organized, and you know how to direct the eye of the viewer. And how did that come about? Like, do you have any background on like architecture or geometrics? How did you develop that?
Messing it up a lot was for me a good way to start. Like, because if I look at my earlier work, it was all, you know, it had all the tropes of amateurish work. Like it had tangents, you know, when things are lining up, like if there's a panel border and, you know, someone's hand is touching the edge of the border and it ruins your depth, you know. It had bad anatomy, bad perspective, but as far as like leading the eye through pages, it was really studying and really trying to learn from people who I think did it exceptionally well and have been critically, you know, lauded for their abilities in that. And, you know, like Bernie Krigstein is one that I bring up a lot. That's a name that, you know, some people know, some people don't. If you like EC horror comics, like the classic old stuff, Bernie Krigstein did some of the best ones. I mean, if you like Will Eisner's graphic storytelling and visual narrative book, I think is essential for anybody that wants to do comics. I look at works by like Toth, Howard Chaykin. There's just so many phenomenal storytellers, and you know, Jack. Don't overthink it. Like Jack Kirby, you know, the guy who invented the superhero language with Joe Simon and a handful of other guys, and just absorbing as much as I could and learning and asking people. And I've been very lucky to meet, you know, artists again, like. I don't know, like I never really had like any trepidation when it came to going up to an older artist and just like talking about their work or asking them questions about it. I was always polite, and you know, my parents raised me to yes sir, thank you sir, what, you know, what was it, what were you thinking here? You know, I did art classes in college and in high school, and you know, I did fine art before that, but it was like really, when it came to storytelling and comics, it was absorbing as much, you know, of the best stuff as I could find as I could. And then when I could ask a question of any of those people, if they were still alive, I did my best to ask them. You know, anytime Howard Chaykin is at a show that I'm at, I have a question about his latest book or a book he did, you know, 20 years ago. Because I think that American Flag, if you know indie comics from the 80s.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I had that.
Oh, it's so great. And he created really like this totally different offshoot of like its own lexicon, its own edicts and everything, where you saw it ripped off for years, and you saw it from people who are lauded as like superior artists, but like the structure came from him. When it came to those little sound effects across the back of a character running away from gunfire, when it came to inset panels, and he actually did a recent panel talk called what was it, the Paradigm, where he completely breaks down how much space there is on a page. And you know, it's being able to talk in artistic terms and really break it down and study stuff. I mean, how do you look at, like, do you do the same thing? Do you do other artists here? Do you have artists around you that influence your work, Rogerio?
Yeah, I got many. You know, like I love the old school artists such as Bernie Wrightson, John Buscema, Frank Miller, you know, Mazzucchelli, all those guys. You know, I think they're all fantastic. I bow to all of them. But I'm at the position that I'm still not sure about what direction I'm gonna take when it comes to, you know, define who I am as an artist. But I'm looking. I'm still searching. You know, and I think it's a matter of time. You know, sometime maybe in 5-10 years. But that's the way I do. Like I look up to the best and try to get as near as possible. You know, that's the way it is.
Don't get too hard on yourself there, though. I mean, you definitely got your own style already, man. Like,
I don't know.
Look at those pages. So,
but talking about art, like, do you think that good art can save a bad story, or a bad story is something that you cannot really bail for?
Well, I mean, it's a visual medium, so I always have to give a little bit of extra credit to the artist. But like, if the story's crap, then you know, it's really tough to make a good comic. I mean, you know, we've all picked up a comic that looked beautiful, but then when you read it, you said, you know, it could have used a bit more substance. Or there's always that one where you're like, man, this is a hell of a story, but it needs something else other than what's printed here. We've all run into it. I just, so yeah, I tend to lean art over story, but it is a collaboration. I acknowledge that both people are important, and several people usually. But yeah, how do you feel about it?
Oh, well, I'm just wondering if that's a hint towards Deadball being a terrible script, and he's just trying to
put you on blast.
Not at all. Not at all.
Really had to pick this one up for Johnny boy. I got to get this thing going here.
No. The story is fantastic. That boy, I'm in love with the script. But when I asked that, that reminds me of Moebius. I don't know if you know John Giraud.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know, like the story was not, I couldn't understand. I still don't. You know, I think it was a bad story, but I couldn't make out what he was talking about. But his art was so good that I bought everything he could draw, everything or anything. And the story was not really there sometimes. You know, there's a thick book of him that every page is a panel. And there's no sequence or story, there's nothing but just beautiful drawings. And like if you smoke something, maybe you're able to understand the story. Since I don't, I still have no idea what he was talking about. But yeah, in my opinion, a good art can save a bad story.
Yeah, and I like it when a story and even the art, it doesn't explain everything. I do it in my own work, my creator-owned stuff like that. I think there has to be a certain level of interpretation that you can. I mean, you have to tell a story, but I do like there being some like questions and things that don't necessarily have to be explained. Like I don't think you have to go in and explain everything about every panel, about every conclusion or every motivation even. Because like the whole show and not tell thing comes along and then you're showing things. But, you know, I personally like, you know, different sorts of captions and thought balloons and speech bubbles. Like, you know, I know that they're not really in vogue anymore, but like the thought balloon was a great way to add an extra layer of motivation and mystery at times. Like it was just a whole nother tool in the box that seems to not really be used anymore.
I think when you're talking about the interpretation thing, that's huge for new creators to take in. Is one of the biggest struggles I had with Yule 1, which was our first ever comic book, is, you know, Joel would be like, I'd be like, yeah, I think we need more dialogue here, or we need to, and he's like, you can leave some to the imagination. Like we don't have to show him, you know, opening the door, then walking in the room, then sitting down. Like you don't have to like have every single moment leading up to the next scene, you know? So
stuff happens between the panels. Stuff happens, you know. It just has to be clear. You know, there's different rules that people think you need to follow, like the 180 degree rule where you can't move the camera 180 degrees, and like, you know, I think that you can play with that, but as long as your what you're showing gives the context and you set things up with your establishing panels, like there's a lot of room to play in between your establishing and then the return. So, you know, that's usually the bookends of a page, the, you know, establish and then return. So
follow the Z pattern, right? Is the visual, right? They need to do that. Yeah.
Top to bottom, left to right.
Yeah, I like seeing. One thing I'm trying to do is doing our own lettering and stuff. I do basically everything on the book, just because we don't have the staff. But trying to incorporate the lettering actually more into the image than being on top of the image, so it's more interactive with the scene. So I think that's been kind of fun. And how do I make that happen? So doing that a little bit in Yule 2, so you'll see a little bit more of that. So it's actually part of that whole entire image, and it can get lost in there, and it's not dominating the art above it, so to speak. And to your point, like you're talking about the thought balloon, thinking about how do you make something different? How do you make this person's inflection visually sound different, right? So it's how do you draw sound, right? So that's kind of some fun things we've been working on too, and trying to incorporate that into the story.
And you said it in a way that I've absolutely thought it, is that like the digital lettering and the sound effects just look like they're floating on top of the artwork and they don't work with it. And one of the ways that I started to push back on that is I would letter it completely with the digital fonts, but then I would use my Cintiq to hand letter the words over top of it, because whether you want it to or not, your penmanship looks like you're drawing. You know, it's all coming from the same hand. And once you, because this one here, digital, obviously, this one here, completely by hand. And it's way more like into the image than it is, even though I have this drop shadow for some pop, it's more part and more, I don't know, it just has a greater unity to it as a piece when you're incorporating both design and illustration, because comic books are not pure illustration. You know, pure illustration does not need to have all the elements of a comic book. It's almost never multiple images. They don't always have to work together, and they sure as hell don't have to work together on pages and as a whole unit usually. So, and then the typography elements to it, like it has so many different layers, and it's only gotten more complex over the years because we've expanded what comics can be, which is great.
Yeah, I definitely see the point. You know, with the hand, I'm thinking, maybe think of like the guys back with, like, I'm a big EC Comics Golden Age guy. When they would use that, I forget the name of the tool, but when they would use the slide rule to do each letter, and they have to slide the letter over. And I have the IDW artist editions for those guys, and you can see where they copy or they cut out like the title, Tales from the Crypt, tape it in the book. Like that stuff's amazing, man. That they were just hand lettering that stuff. There was no, you know, digital Cintiq or any software like that where they were able to drop that stuff in. And I don't know if my ADD could handle doing a whole book with that little slide rule tool, but it might just drive me crazy. So, yeah,
no,
that's crazy stuff.
And Charlton was another company that was around from the 50s, basically the late 40s to the mid 80s. And what they had for a period of time, and this blows my mind to this day, is they had a giant typewriter, and they would put the art pages in this giant typewriter. So can you imagine feeding like an original Steve Ditko page, bending it around the roller of a typewriter to put in the dialogue with like this mediocre typewriter font? And you know, they did it for years. And if you look at some of those, like the Blue Beetle comics had it, the Question comics had it, like all that action hero stuff from the 60s, with the exception of, I think, Peacemaker, because Pat Boyette hand lettered his own stuff. But like everything else, I just picture these like masterpieces being fed into this mechanical monster and ruining the edges and like bending them. And you know, I realized that original art was not seen as the asset that it is today, but like still, like the modern brain thinking of like all those works going into a machine just for the lettering, it's just
that sounds like a stressful job. I wouldn't want to be like, whoa, I ripped the page. Oh shit.
I have some ace indies that are like that, where it's they either put through the typewriter or they actually cut out like the strips and like put them in, and you can see almost like the tape, and then they would print it with this like whatever, dude, like we don't care, just run this thing. So it's funny.
Yeah, there was
it's
a
typewriter
fun.
font.
Yeah, there was a period of time where they did all paste ups. Like they would print them on like a piece of paper, or they would glue them down. Like that was kind of the standard practice for a long time. But if you look at like old Archie pages, I have a few, and they're all just ink on paper, hand done by the pages I have are by Sam Schwartz. He was there for decades. And it's just like, if you go from one page to the next, like there are little subtleties, but because it's done so big, when they reduce it, all those little shaky bits that you see on the big lettering go away, you know, because you're doing them at twice up back then. So it's literally going to be half the size. So all those little shakes are half the size. I don't remember the name of the letterer, but did you guys read the 1980s Justice League? It had like Kevin McGuire on art and DeMatteis and stuff. Anyway, they had a letterer that was very unique because it had even more. I've never seen the originals, but they had a very unique little shake to it, and it was through the entire run, and it was just this beautiful little thing. And back to the Tick, with the hand lettering in the Tick, that was originally done by Bob Polio, and he kind of added, like, you know, when he would write the word "the," he would underline it, you know, and he would add little flares throughout it just to make it a little bit different. And those were all done on paste ups and then put onto the board. I actually got to see some pages from Ben Edlund's original run recently, and it was like awesome. they were all yellowed and starting to come off a little bit because, you know, they were done, you know, at this point in 1986. That was 40 years ago, you know. So
I was going to ask, like, does that stuff still survive? Does he hang on to that? Is it like on like is it like a museum piece in the hallway? Is that NEC? Like what happens to that stuff?
Well, I know Ben kept a chunk of it, but like some of it he sold, like, and some of it got out there. And the pages I saw were private collectors, and he'd been a collector for a number of years, and it was just cool to see, because I look at the way the tick changed over time, but you still go back to the original Ben stuff. And when you see the Ben pages, they were inked by different people at different times. Like Dave Garcia inked some of that stuff. And he did the Paul the Samurai series, and he also did Ninja Turtles at Archie, and he did a bunch of other stuff like PandaCon. But you can see his little flares and differences. That connection of the penciler and the inker when they're different people. I heard it described by Eastman at one point, the way he and Peter Laird worked together was that they created an artist, a separate artist that no longer exists when they don't collaborate. And I really liked how they put that, because it's like it's such a unique and interesting merging of their two different skill sets to become a whole new thing.
Yeah.
Do you pencil and ink your own stuff, guys, like Joel and Rogerio?
Oh, I do everything you see visually, because we're just at that point, right? So it's some era, like we'll bring on staff, but I do the lettering, the penciling, the ink, and the color. It's just, that's where we're at this point, right? So you do what you got to do to get it out there, and it's a labor of love. It takes a while.
I started dabbling into like trying to learn the lettering aspect to try to take something off his plate at least, because once I write it, it's all in his hands at that point, So and same with Rogerio. I didn't mean to cut you off, Rogerio. You can answer the question, but
yeah, I do mostly, from pencils to inks, and going through lettering, because we don't have a letterer. Though we had someone on the chat submitting already, which is nice. But yeah, I know that's part of the job. Yeah, that's the man. And I think by being an indie publisher, you have to do many things, to make it work. And I wouldn't go as far as doing coloring, because that would take so much time. And I really appreciate those guys. Like Joel's the guy who's going to color that ball, and he's doing a title already, and I don't know how he's going to get the time for it. And
3 a.m. nights instead of 2 a.m. Right? I guess we're gonna have to lose an hour of sleep, right? So
yeah, he doesn't sleep. He never sleeps. Like he goes to bed after me, and when I wake up, he's already there.
4 hours a night, 4 hours quality a night. We're good.
Yeah, he's a legend.
I can't imagine doing that now. That was what I was doing in my 20s, but man,
I don't want to, but just my mind gets up and I'm too excited about what I'm going to do in the day and start thinking about nonsense like, is Gary Coleman still alive? Yeah. I guess he is. Like, I don't know, like stupid stuff that comes in your head. Just, like, why am I thinking about this? Wakes you up and you're ready to go. So, right. So, yeah.
The funny thing is that was probably an actual thought you had in your head, Gary Coleman.
That was a real thought I had in my head. That was a real thought.
You looked it up, you grabbed your phone and looked it up.
Yes, I did.
Well, there used to be that website. What was it? Is Abe Vigoda still alive? And you just go there, and it was yes for like decades, and then one day it wasn't yes anymore.
My wife was talking about being Elvira for Halloween, so a good segue for you. I was like, well, she, how old is she? She's been around forever. So I have to go look, these are things I think about at like 3:45 a.m. and I got to wake up and obviously have to go research that for whatever reason, because there's no possible way you could look that up at like 9:30, right? You have to know now, because otherwise you wouldn't sleep and it would bother you. So, yeah, this is how my mind works, Ian. This is what's going on here. So.
I try to. If I get 6 hours of sleep, I'm good. But I don't know, 4 hours, I'd probably. Couple nights of that, and I'd be passing out on the couch at 9 o'clock at night. So,
well, I told you we do the dad nap. The dad nap is the move, right? You sleep 7:30 to 8:30. Just do the little dad nap, and you're good to go, man. That's why us old guys pass out in the lazy boy, like in front of the game. That's what happens.
It's a recharge.
Yeah, and you have no idea how inconvenient that is. A dad nap, by the way. It'll be like that'll be the exact time where my kids go down, and I'm like, all right, finally I can text Joel about the story. I got to ask him something, and then I'm like, oh shit, he's probably sleeping. Like,
yeah, I'm asleep. I'm out. Taking a nap. Yeah.
Just let the man nap. Just let the man nap.
Talking about sleep, how would be your routine, your work routine?
I mean, my routine now, my day to day, I get up early. I'll get up 6:30, 7 o'clock, and have a real breakfast, get caffeinated. I like to be drawn by 8:15, 8:30 and working. And I'll work, take a lunch break, work till dinner, and then after dinner back to work. I will work till usually around 10 if I don't have any tight deadlines. But if you have deadlines, you work as late as you got to work. I've gotten much better at knowing how long it takes me to draw things. So that has really helped like manage my time. And that was something that early on, especially when, you do independent stuff, you got to take as many jobs as you can get done professionally and do a good job and not leave anybody hanging, but you still got to know like how long it takes you to do stuff. I mean, it was only, a year or so ago that I knew exactly how long it took me to draw. How many convention sketches can I do in a day? Like that was another thing where I just started keeping track of it. Like this many full figures, this many, headshots, this many busts. Like this is what I can do in a day. Because at at a San Diego, you got to pump out 200 quick sketches instead of doing 5 in-depth ones. And
you never miscalculate that? No.
Oh, of course I do. It becomes relative because if someone asks for a headshot of Galactus as opposed to a headshot of the Tick, obviously it takes longer, and I'll stop paying attention at some point or get tired and just like keep going. Like, yeah, we'll do another one. It's fine. But then you work on them at night in the hotel room or whatever. You get up and you work on them during breakfast. But I usually work all day, and then I'll work till 10:30, and then I'll watch TV with my wife, and I try to spend some time with her and make time for her. At least we'll spend a Sunday together instead of me like working constantly, because you got to have that work-life balance as best you can do it while still making enough money to pay the bills. Like it's a difficult balance, and people. My wife has been a saint dealing with some of this stuff, and it's not always. It's a ridiculous notion to be like, I'm going to draw funny books and that's what we're doing. But when you can pull it together, it's fun. Like there's a fun thing about it. Like, and there's a little bit of chaos to it. So I don't know. It's stressful at times, and other times it fuels you. Like it motivates you to like pick up that pencil and finish that drawing, or pull up the light box and redraw that cover because you screwed up something that only you were going to notice. That's another thing that I still do, and I have a hard time letting go of a piece if I don't think it's right. But there are some times when you have no choice but to send it on in and make the deadline, and just do the best you can at the time. And that's kind of how I don't know if you guys, when you look back at your old works, you're like, God, what was I doing? It's all terrible. If it was the best I could do at that time, then I forgive myself a little bit. I still don't say it's good, but it's like you did your best, kid.
You don't say it's terrible either.
I say I draw with my qualities and my flaws equally, right? So that's how it comes out.
Perfect. That's good.
That's it.
I like that. I'm going to steal that.
Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that when you're an artist and you're happy with your work, you're no longer an artist.
No, I was just going to say something similar to that. If you constantly can find something that you would improve upon, then I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's drive, and I think that means you care, right? Like you want to put the best possible thing out to people, especially when you're doing something, that like the Tick or Ninja Turtles, where they're iconic, so I'm sure, we're doing our own indie stuff, right? And we still feel that way, but I can't even imagine doing, an iconic comic and trying to put it down on paper and then thinking I can do better, am I doing this series justice, Well,
one of the things that's really hard is like, I've been looking at pictures, and so have you guys. You've all been reading these comics for a million years. And then when you think about that character without having it in front of you, you don't picture it in your drawing style. You don't picture it in your voice. You picture it in somebody else's, whether it's Ben or Eli or Sean. That's the Tick. And it took me a long time to really get comfortable. And they don't put out a lot of books. So it's like, and honestly, with the Ninja Turtles, like I never got fully comfortable because it was always just like these spotty variant cover gigs here and there. and it was never like, I never got to sink in on some sequential pages. And that's where you spend time, moving the lighting, moving the camera, and then you really get a feeling of the three-dimensionality of these things and where you can, do the design work and do the things that really, like, you become more comfortable and you become more knowledgeable about it as you go. And, and as much as I like working on those characters, I also like doing my own stuff because, like, you get your freedom, you get to do what you want to do, and it's really challenging yourself. And if you even look at my own works outside of the intellectual properties and stuff, like, my style has continued to change. And that's one of the things that's made it tough for me to get gigs at times, is that I have the ability to follow a style guide, but I also am always searching for that thing. There was a time when I had really stretched out figures and elongated figures because I thought that was more dynamic. And then there was a time when I was going really hatchy and really with, like, the Franklin Booth influence and seeing, like, how much detail I could pack into a piece. And, that just, like, completely went into another direction with doing heavy contrast with a really good brush. Like, I started out inking with a brush, and then the brushes I found were garbage. So I stopped inking with a brush. And then when I finally found good brushes again, I started going back to it. And I was like, oh, it's because it's so free and flowy and you can do things with it that, if you're trying to do a line with a pen, it takes you an hour just to get the different thickness and thin, the taperings on the lines to get it. And like you said, you're always looking to get better. And to be honest, I don't know if I've ever met anybody who was in love with their work that was all that good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Like, I've met people whose work I have idolized, like, and absolutely, like, lionized and said, this work is amazing. And, they'll look at it, they'll flat out tell you, like, I'm still improving, I'm still getting better, I'm still looking for that thing that's going to take it to another level, even though, in my mind, these guys are, like, making some of the best comics ever.
Yeah, I think that I ran into that problem too in the fine art world. Is like, they wanted to have a definitive style. Like, well, what type of a painter are you? It's like, well, sometimes I like to do abstract stuff. Sometimes I like to do realism. Sometimes I like to just grab a fork out of my drawer and paint with that just to see if I can. Right. And I think that comes a lot with a commercial product and marketability, right? They want to know, like, if Kenny Rogers released a hip hop album, they'd probably be like, yo, like, Kenny, like, what are you doing, guy, right? So they want to know, like, what they're getting. I think it's ultimately it, but it gets kind of frustrating because you don't want to sometimes creatively, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into a certain thing, right? You should be growing as an artist. You should be getting better. Every page you do should be better than the last one, hopefully, right? So yeah, I can see what you're saying with that. So that can be, I think it's a little frustrating at times, but sometimes you just have to reel it in and say, okay, I'm going to save my experimental weird stuff for myself, and for my commercial audience, I'm going to just focus on this one particular thing because that's what they expect and that's what they like and that's what sells for them, because there's somebody else that has to get paid ultimately too.
Oh yeah, if you're going to do somebody's job, you're going to do it. If you're going to take their money, you have to do their job. But I also, like, have had an interesting set of experiences when it comes to, you show your work and you show your body of work, which clearly shows, like, a set of skills, whether it's your storytelling or your ability to color or whatever. And the best editors I've ever worked for have been able to look at any set of drawings and picture and know that if I ask them to do this, they can do it. And I've tried to have that myself when I've been in the editor's chair, and I think that is a skill that is hard. And it's much easier to see a prepackaged thing and know that, like, well, this guy draws like so-and-so, so I can put them on a similar book, and then that book will at least, continue on in the same direction. They're not going to go, he's not going to wake up one day and go, hey, I'm going to do a Franklin Booth thing and see how this goes. It's an interesting thing when you're navigating the profession and the commercial aspect of it. So, like, because when I did fine art stuff, it was oil paintings, it was watercolors, but it was definitely, like, one of the things I was uncomfortable about it was that it was not for everyone. Like, fine art has a price point that excludes a lot of people, and that's one of the things I fell in love with comics for, was because in a comic book, whether it's Dead Ball, whether it's Jewel, whether it's Acts of Helena, you have landscapes, you have portraits, you have cityscapes, you have art galleries in your pocket, and that is an aspect to it that I love, and I continue to try to have it available at price points that as many people can afford it as possible.
Yeah, that was a big part of my shift in going back into sequential too. To your point, is the fine art. Some people feel excluded or priced out of that market, but sometimes they'd be surprised because us guys need to pay bills and eat too, so we can get cheap if we need to. Right? So it's funny. So talk a little bit about. Now, did you have the Tick first and then go to the Turtles, or was it kind of at the same time, or what was that timeline like for you when you got to? Let's go switch over to the Turtles a little bit and talk about that.
Sure, yeah. And actually, this one here was my first cover, and that was for TMNT Animated Adventures number 4. And it was a convention exclusive, and it was a situation where the convention said, we're going to do this book, and we need an artist to do the cover. And this is one of those stories that shows the patience of my wife, because in order to get the gig, they had me do drawing tests. Because I was unproven in their eyes. They sent me an 80-page style guide for the TV show, and I read the thing. I went through it. I did sketchbook work, and then they said, we want you to draw a turtle with one of these backgrounds in this style, and then we'll look at it. Because initially, I just did a quick drawing of what I remember the turtles being, the old Mirage stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's what it looked like. The sketch was the Mirage Studios. And I had no idea it was for a specific show's adaptations or expansions. Like, I just thought it was a Turtles book that I was doing. So I drew what I remembered from the comics. And that was not what they wanted, because this is a property that's with Nickelodeon. They've made this show, and it needs to be in these branding specific looks. And I did the drawing test, and I had to do part of it the same day as a 4th of July barbecue that I had already agreed to be at. So I had to kind of like negotiate, like I can be there for a couple hours, but then I got to get to work, and made that work. And, it was actually at the party. I brought my stuff to the party so that like I could be there as long as I could be, and I could find just a quiet corner, and I could do the work I needed to do, and then we'd leave when everybody wanted to leave. And I did it. I did it at the party, and then I went home, scanned it, colored it, sent it in, and they approved it. And then there was the process of like doing thumbnails. Bobby Curnow was not the editor-in-chief then. He was the sub-editor with Tom Waltz, and Eastman was on the book and stuff like that. I think Chris Burnham was the writer. I have not met Chris in person, but submitted the thumbnails. They picked the one they liked. They wanted it to have like a Rhode Island theme, since it was for the Rhode Island Comic-Con. That's why they have those like the wrong way. You see like the torches at the bottom, because they have an event called Waterfire in Rhode Island for people that aren't in New England. It's this event where they have like these big torches in the river, and they'll have boats and a big festival at nighttime. And that's basically what it was. And I added some little bits that I liked, like Leo is drinking Adele's lemonade, because they were one of the sponsors of the show. And I love Dell's lemonade, so I was like, yeah, let's do it. I love Dell's. And it was just adding more to the New England thing, like with the Ninja Turtles being a New England thing. I said, it makes sense that they'd be interacting with that sort of stuff. And that one led into, I think the next one was actually the 51 cover, the TMNT 51 cover. And this was, again, another situation where there was a deadline and it had to be done quick. And I had already agreed to be somewhere. We were on vacation, and I would get up early in the morning at like 3 a.m. and sit on the floor in the bathroom with my drawing board working on the cover, because it was this big wraparound cover. So it's 2 spreads. And in this instance, like, there were new villains that were showing up, but they didn't send me any reference. And I had asked for them and asked for them and asked for them, and they said, we've got to get it in. Here's a pencil drawing. And they gave me the pencil drawing. I said, great. And then when I went to go do the colors, I was like, what color are they?
Oh man.
And I didn't get an answer quick enough, because I had to have it done that day. So I just said, I'm going to put them in shadow, and you guys can, do what you need to do. And I put them in complete shadow, so they're like purplish, grayish, dark colors with like glowing red eyes. And then when I get the comic book, I open it up and they're ghost white.
You flipped the coin and got the wrong side, right? So,
I did. That was, and they're in shadow, so we'll go with that.
Awesome.
But
yeah, I think one of the things that would be challenging when you approach Turtles is that they had such a variation of what they looked like, right? You had the original kind of dark Eastman Laird style things with very heavy contour and bold, and then you had more of the, like you said, the Nickelodeon stuff, the Archie stuff, had a totally different feel. So it's like, how do you come about that? Now they're kind of going back, I feel, in the new stuff with like Last Ronin, like Ben Bishop stuff, is a lot more kind of getting back to that roots of that darker stuff. That's what I grew up with, so I like that. But I almost feel like your style is almost more conducive to that older style, like the way I look at your line work and things like that. Do you think that that's true, or would you be more, if you had to choose, I guess, would you be more inclined to do something more like the traditional style, or more of like the cartoony Archie style, or maybe a mix of both? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Lawson and Talbot stuff at Mirage. Like, I think that they just did so much interesting stuff. Like Eric Talbot has like this beautiful, graceful, like line mixed with like heavy texture, which I love. And you see like this feathering with this brushwork. I think I would lean in that direction, but I would use the heavy contrast that I'm using now, which is kind of like what Andy Kuhn did at his time on the book. And I don't quite know how to pronounce his name. I apologize if that's wrong. It's Kuhn, I think.
Yeah.
And he does terrific stuff. He did like stuff for Image and all sorts of stuff and Marvel. But he had like a high contrast look on some of his turtle work with heavy shadows that I always thought was great. And with the 51 cover, as opposed to the animated adventures one, the 51 cover was on the regular series, so it was actually a different looking set of turtles, and it was a little bit at that time closer to how I drew, and then going from that one, I had to go back to the animated look with the Batman TMNT animated adventures cover, and that one was actually merging the Nickelodeon like kids look with the Bruce Timm Batman style. And it was funny, like I got the assignment, they sent me some reference and they're like, okay, we need you to follow this reference. And I was like, okay, I know the drill. And then I actually talked to Ben Bishop and he was like, oh, they didn't send me that stuff. I just did what I wanted to do. And I was like, what? But yeah, that's awesome. It just seemed like each one was in a different direction. And that goes back to like one of the reasons I never got comfortable with that stuff. It's because it was always something a little different, and there was a ton of time between stuff. It would basically be like one cover a year. It's not like I was ever doing the interiors on that stuff. So like the turtle stuff also, like I think that definitely opened up doors more with the Tick, and I think around that time, around the 51 cover, they gave me the special and it was just, and I kind of laugh a little bit because again, being born in New England and spending most of my life here, I worked on like the New England characters, and I was like, I was actually wondering how many were left. Like I know that like the old Morbius comics in the 70s took place in Boston, so like, what else is out there that I need to like check off to get all the New England characters? So
I think you got a pretty good resume going there with those. That's awesome. But did you just say, so you did one of the Batman Turtles covers?
Yeah, it was the animated adventures ones. It was the second series that IDW and DC put out. It was not the first one that Freddie Williams and I think Eastman did together. They did the other one.
I have to. I wonder if I have. I love those series. So I got to go back and look at my collection now. That'd be cool.
Well, it was interesting. Like, who knows? It probably the only time I'll ever get to draw Batman. So
yeah.
You get to tell the grandkids.
Yeah. I wanted to shift gears and ask. When we were talking about the cons and all that a few minutes back, so we're going to be having our first con next weekend.
I heard, very exciting. Yeah.
Oh, we're really excited. I mean, we'll see what the turnout is with everything going on, but hopefully it's decent. But there's plenty of creators out there that are probably in the same boat where they haven't had one yet because of everything going on these last few years, or someone that maybe had one or two that weren't successful. What sort of tips can you give to newer creators, for cons? What do you see as working, not working, those sort of things?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to steer us into the COVID discussion, but like as far as like do what makes you what you're comfortable doing, that's like. But also, I always encourage, especially if it's your first show and you're putting out something new that no one's ever seen before, is just be able to talk about your work and be able to talk about it. Obviously, it's your work. Be enthusiastic, and I kind of cringe when the sales pitch is always like, "Oh, mine is kind of like this other book," because I always think of that as you putting your book below someone else's. Don't do that. Like your book deserves to stand on its own. Describe it with the terms you think work, and if you're excited about it, and people you're talking to they're going to get excited too, and they're going to see the great cover, and they're going to see everything, and they're going to see what you're doing, and that you're there, and they get to meet you as the creator. And I always just tell people to like, especially be very kind, and like be kind to especially the young readers, because like if your book is their first book, if you're the first artist they meet, the first writer they meet, and they have a great experience, you're their person. Like, and they're going to follow your work, and then they're going to get more into other works. And I think it's one of the biggest responsibilities of creators going to conventions is reaching out to new readers. Like, we can't just rely on marketing. You can't just rely on good content. Being the champion of your own work is going to help you the best in the long run with new readers. And it's hard. There was a time where I couldn't talk at all in public, and I was very nervous and quiet, and I was the art kid. I had my head down drawing all the time. And this has been talking this long. This is like, if you had told some of the people that knew me as a kid, like they would say, you're nuts. There were people that didn't even know what I sounded like, that I went to school with for 4 years. So unless you're on a baseball team, but definitely do that. Have change very high. If you can take PayPal at least with cash, like or Cash App, like have one digital form of currency that you accept. One of the things that you're not going to experience in New Hampshire, but you'll experience in other states, is sales tax. And it's different in every state. And it takes some work to get used to it and to learn what you got to do. I pay a person to do my taxes because I am not smart enough to do them all. But I've had to learn, like, some places require you to buy a temporary sales permit. Others you have to get the full year, but like they almost always have it on your application. So if the show sends you an application, read the whole thing. Okay. I know it's boring, but like there's usually some good stuff in there, and they usually give you all the info you need, and you can always reach out and ask them. At a convention, like if you have already dealt with like the leading up to it, before that, if you have a picture of yourself, a picture of your work, a description of you, a description of your work ready to go to send that to the show, that just helps the convention help you. Having your promotional materials ready for them and making it easy to get to, like have a page on your website that is just that. Like this is like what they can put in the program. If it's a show that'll print banners for you, have a high-res photo there. Like there are different shows that'll do different things for you, and making it easier for them means they're going to help you more. So being engaging, having a decent hello, nothing too scientific, but definitely change, because I've had to make change for my neighbors plenty of times. Or you have to go to like 3 gas stations and buy water with $20 bills. I've been there.
That side of it's huge. That honestly, maybe Joel thought of this. We haven't talked about that aspect, but that didn't even cross my mind on the cash side of it. So
I thought of it. Yeah, you know me. I got of it too.
Yeah. But that's huge,
like,
though.
Like Ian, you said with the kids. I mean, that's exactly how Ben was. When I was a kid, and that's how I became a Tick fan. So that's a great example, right? Same with Turtles and things. Those guys were approachable and kind and gave me their time, and it was fun.
They still are.
Right? 30 years later, I'm still a fan. So, right, it stuck. So, good advice. It works.
Yeah, and with
Right.
with both Ben and Kevin, they both still do free little quick sketches. Like you've seen the Kevin Eastman turtle heads on everything, and Ben still does them too, and I still do them as well. Like I think that is something that I have chosen to do that I could monetize, but I don't think I should for the health of the industry and of my like people who support me. Like that's just a little thing that takes 2 seconds that just makes their day, and they can walk away saying like, wow, that was nice, instead of, oh man, he didn't look up at me, he didn't say hello, and then when he signed my book he just was like, ah, go away.
Yeah. I just
Yeah.
can't imagine being in that mindset. And like we've tried to think of things to make kids attracted to our table. Like we're gonna give Livid Comics balloons away to kids, like
Yeah,
stuff that just like has them. I mean, they're gonna see our balloons hanging. They're probably gonna want to go over that way too, right? And
yeah,
we're not gonna charge them. We're gonna give the kids balloons. So
yeah.
just
And,
try to
and
think
those
outside
are,
the box.
yeah, I mean, having promotional stuff is great. And sometimes you can't afford to make promotional stuff. So just being
Yeah.
kind and like, you know, with the convention stuff, I mean, having a good spot is always great, but you don't have any control over it. They're pretty much going to pick where you're going to go, but being prepared and like having the business end is tough, and it's taken a long time. And it takes, if you know people who run small businesses or can talk to them, or if you've done them yourselves, like it takes some paperwork, and you know they didn't explain that in art school. Like they didn't explain that to me. So it's been talking to tax people, talking to lawyers, talking to like learning as much as I can. Whether it's dealing with your own, putting together your own benefits, if you pay someone a certain amount of money in the course of a year, you have to do taxes for them. You have to send them a 1099 or whatever you have to do. And it's, when you do it, it's not that hard, but it does take a lot of time, and it's taking your time away from creating comics. So I always try to think of ways like, if I can afford to pay a person to do this, they can handle these things, and I can spend more time making these. So again, just coming back to that time management, it's just like, again, I learned by messing it up, and then trying to learn from people who maybe themselves messed it up and could tell me without messing it up. So
Yeah.
Yeah, Rosario's having some connection issues tonight, so he's all the way in Brazil. So who knows? Could be anything. We're a universe apart, so it could be anything. So he had to pop off. He tried to come back.
We've all gone through it at least once. So
Yeah,
um,
yeah. I mean, it's amazing we're even able to do it. This technology. So it's made a world of difference. Like I used to do podcasts back in the day. We had the people come right in person to do it by audio. So this is great that we're able to go all over the world and have people from everywhere. So it's been pretty awesome. So
yeah.
And has that, do you think that has helped you push yourselves further than you think you would have been before as a company?
I mean,
think
we're
so.
not. Yeah, I mean, it's great to network, right? I mean, it's awesome to talk to people like yourself and other people in the industry. And every single show, we learn something. Like you just talking about recommendations for the con, we learn something. So a little bit of it's some selfishness too, where we get to take some from all these great people. So for a couple hours a week, we get to pick the minds of people that have been doing this, that are doing it, that we admire and look up to. So it's been awesome, man. It's a great treat for all of us to be able to do that too. So it's good for us, and good. Hopefully the listeners get something off of it too. So
Yeah.
that's part
Well,
of
and
it
then
too.
when you think from the company perspective too, like Joel and I have, even though we work together in our day job, we're not working in the office anymore. We're working from home right now still. So when it comes to Livid Comics, we've met in person twice through this whole
Wow.
9-10 months or whatever that we've been doing this. I went to his house twice. Once to pick up some promotional posters because I was excited to get them, and then the other time was to package our collector's edition for Yule 1 to send out to people, and we spent a good chunk of the day doing that. But everything else has been over the phone or over the computer, like just all technology based. So and I don't know if, if we weren't working from home, we would have been sitting there trying to figure out how the hell to do it. Like now there's so many platforms out there that have been used over the past few years. So I think from a technology perspective, it's pushed us. And then also from a creativity point, it's pushed us because we started doing comics because we had, the extra time to start working on them, and Joel pushed away from the art shows because they weren't as busy anymore, so he started looking at sequential again. And I actually started writing Yule as a novel because I'm like, if I'm not going to write now, when am I ever going to do it? I'm never going to have this time that I have right now where I don't have 2 hours of commuting a day. I don't have, going out to the bar as a distraction with friends or doing this and that. Like if I'm not going to write now, it's never going to happen. So, um, technology wise and time wise, I think it's definitely pushed us to another level. So.
Oh, there's just so much more access to stuff. Like I remember when I first started doing comics, the first comic I ever did was also published by a store. And it was when I lived in Ohio. I was just a little teenager, and the store just made their own comics and printed their own comics. And obviously they didn't blow up like the Tick, but they supported the local artist community by doing this. And back then there weren't really online printers, so we had to have a local print house that did it, and we would go over and drop off the floppy disk and it had the pages on that, and they'd print them out a few days later. And but nowadays there's so many options online for promo material or for books or for legal advice or like whatever you need for like making a comic. Like it seems like that it's just gotten more readily available especially for those of us that are in love with printed pages as well as digital pages.
Yeah. So. And YouTube, right? I mean, even YouTube just has everything you could imagine.
Everything you wish you couldn't imagine too.
It's true. This is true. I just like, even when I was like, oh man, I should look into trying to start lettering for us, and so I went to YouTube, and there's just all this stuff that teaches you how to do it. And back in the day, what would you have done, right? I mean, maybe there's a couple books on it, like you would have had to pick people's brains. So we're lucky in that aspect. But
yeah, I'll listen to other creators' podcasts, or they used to do they would film panels at conventions, so you'd be able to listen to like there's videos of like Gil Kane and Jack Kirby talking on YouTube, which is just crazy and awesome. And you can watch Mobius draw, you can watch John Romita draw, you can listen to like all these creators from back in the day that are just like, again, like it's just a well of knowledge, and hearing it from the first source is just it's always fun. I mean, I eat that stuff up.
Yeah,
it's an incredible archive. What do they say? I think digitally every single day there's more information that's recorded than the entire written history of man in one day in terms of digital content created. That's a statistic that I heard one time, and I believe it. I mean, everybody that's taking photos or doing TikTok or making videos like this, I mean, everybody's doing it. So it's just incredible. Every day it just compounds. So it's this incredible archive of different things. So
yeah, and it's always. And I'm always trying to look at it from a different way. Like there's so much content out there that like you can get a little bit lost. And like it's, even if you're making brilliant content, you still got to like have the in-person conventions and meet people one-on-one and slowly grow it. And you guys are doing a great job with these podcasts, adding things. And I enjoyed talking to you, Joel, at the show. I mean, it just
it was awesome. It was fun.
Hearing you talk about.
I was on 4 hours of sleep, so I was crazy that day. So I apologize.
Oh man, I was so bummed I couldn't go to that too. I was like, oh come on, of all shows, but
it was a nice little show. So
yeah,
it was a good time.
Yeah, it was a little less crowd than the April show, but it was still fun. It was hot in there too. It was really humid that day. We got a lot of humidity. Yeah, that hit the show.
When we went in April, it was shoulder to shoulder. Like it was packed.
Oh wow.
But I wanted to ask a little outside of the comic side of things. So your resume there showed doing some stuff for the Pats and the Red Sox. Was that graphical design stuff, or what did you do for them?
Well, for the Red Sox, I'm the artist of the Wally comics. So like,
oh no kidding!
Oh, okay. Oh, nice, that's awesome. There you go.
When we're
now that you say it, like, of course he is. Like, why wouldn't he be? Right, so, right.
Again, that's another New England character right there. And I will say, like, my father has been a Red Sox fan since 1967, and like, he loving, supporting father, but like, you draw on your funny books, it's a little weird, you're an art guy. But when I drew the Wally comic, that's when it was like, my kid's an artist. He's a real artist. Like,
he's arrived.
This is real. That was the moment. So like, that was for him. I actually sent him a page of the original artwork and had it framed for Christmas for him, one of the covers, and I was just like, it made him irrationally happy, so I was happy to like oblige him for that one. And for the Pats, I haven't done anything, but for the Providence Bruins, which is the minor league hockey team, I did a couple of comics for them. They made like a superhero character called Ice Cap, and it was like kind of interweaving with this other company's books that I work on called Altered Reality, and they run comic conventions in Colorado Springs and Rhode Island and Connecticut, some other places. And we had set up a deal where they would publish original comics at shows, and that was something I had pitched them, was like, if you have your own characters, you do your own thing, you don't have to pay licensing, and you can build your own little universe and support artists, and that's what they've been doing for a number of years, until the pandemic. Obviously all the conventions shut down and everything, but they're slowly coming back. There will be a Rhode Island this year, and
oh nice, that's cool.
We're planning on doing comics next year once things get a little more hopefully, knock on wood, everything continues to improve, and we're all kicking butt at conventions next year.
Oh, I'm excited for next year. Hopefully,
signing up for a lot of stuff.
We probably should be actually, but I think the plan is to at least slowly build it up, right? Like right now, the part of the reason, obviously, pandemic. The traffic in these places may not be what it normally would, but also we only had one book out too, so we're like, how many conventions are we going to do without being creative here? So
I will say one thing though, even though you have one book, every time you go to a different show, you're reintroducing that to new people that have never seen it before. So it's very easy for you to get overly familiar with your work, and I've done it. I've absolutely done it, and I've not properly introduced my work at another show. Because if you do a show in New Hampshire, like sure, if you do a bunch of shows in New Hampshire, you'll have some crossover because people go to all the shows. But if you go to another state, absolutely, like move around New England, like do store signings, and you're going to meet all kinds of new readership, and they're all meeting you for that first time. And I'm excited for you guys. It's going to be great.
Oh, thanks,
thanks, man.
One of the things we're doing too, I think we said it on the show, was bringing in some other indie creators' titles and have them on our table, just to say, like, here are some guys that can't make it to New Hampshire or whatever, but so we don't have just a book, but we've picked up like 4 or 5 different titles of things that we enjoy and people that we've worked with. Just say, yeah, man, we'll put you on our table and whatever. So hopefully we can get them out to more people. So if we can pay it forward, that's kind of
that's awesome.
I'm hoping that works out well. And there's even a local comic shop opening a brand new one here in town tomorrow, which is a big deal because I'm in the middle of nowhere, so anything new is awesome. And we're talking about maybe putting a spinner rack there, doing the same kind of thing, where we just take other indies and put them on the rack for the guy, people that we've vetted, that we feel are quality, that hopefully they can sell through their store and get them into another audience. So
hell yeah,
that's something we're going to get back. Yeah.
That was a big deal for me when I first got to Boston, was when New England Comics looked at some of my first like little self-published books. Like they weren't hiring me to do the Tick at the time, but they said, hey, if you're going to make these books, we'll put them in our stores for you. And they had 5 stores, so that immediately got into like way more people than I thought was ever possible, let alone like overnight just dropping off a box of books at a store. And when stores are supportive, like there are so many awesome stores in the New England area that like go out of their way to help independent publishers, because they're not making their rent money on independent comics. Right. Like I worked at a comic book store a number of years ago, so I know what some of the numbers look like. Like it has to be like just the passion for the comics and the people coming in for that. And I with paying it forward, like anytime any one of those people like helps one of my friends or anything else, I'm happy to go to their store. I'm happy to promote their store. Like there are just so many, like, whether it's Rubber Chicken, whether it's Million Year Picnic, like there's out in Cambridge, like Comically Speaking, New England Comics, like they carry indie comics because the people there love them and they love the form. And and not every store does. I remember when I was driving around with those very same comics, and I never showed up unannounced, so I always called in advance. That's another tip, because if you show up, especially on like a Wednesday, they'll just tell you to go, and they will never look at your
Wednesday.
Work. Yeah.
Fulfillment day.
Yeah, don't show on a pull day. Yeah.
But I showed up, and the guy said, he looked at me and he said, "These are pretty good." And I actually remember another creator who showed up with his little photocopied books. Do you know who Ed McGuinness is? And he was another guy that lived in Massachusetts who did his own books. And he said, "You know what? I didn't carry his book either, and I'm not going to carry yours because we don't carry independent comics." And I said, "Okay, then why'd you have me come out here?" And then that was,
man.
But hey, I kept going, and there were way more people who were supportive than not. And that was another thing that I learned. And the worst they can do is say no. That was another one of my sayings, whether it came to calling people about covers or doing anything for any of my little books, or just getting into a store or whatever. That became sort of a motto that, like, it was tough to put yourself out there for me to go out there and be like, "Hey, really well-known illustrator, do you want to draw my little character?" The worst they could do is say no, and it has happened, but very rarely. And sometimes they'll be like, "You know what? Sure, you seem nice."
Yeah. Hey, well, that's the case in any situation, even with like this show. Like, we're a brand new podcast. This is like our 14th or 15th episode, and we've had some fairly decent names on our show already.
Sure.
People saying yes, like, right. And same thing, we talked to another host, and they said the worst thing they can say is no. So why not? I mean, I've had people not respond, sure, but I pretty much, if it's anyone that we enjoy reading or their artwork, like, I'm gonna reach out to them. So it works in that front too. I wanted to mention, because I know it sounds like you're a baseball guy, like Joel and I. In the comic world, I don't know how many of us there are, but so fun fact, first of all, the main character in Deadball is named after Ted Williams. His name's Ted, and then his last name's Miller. I did that after Bill Miller, because that was the time when the Sox were breaking our heart and then winning the championship. So but
not Rick Miller, the old utility infielder.
No. The whole, what was it? 0304, like, it was Bill Miller, like Kevin Millar, like Johnny Damon, like those guys. But we hadn't talked to one another about Deadball. So I started writing this outline for a baseball story, which, for the most part, there's a lot of similarities to Deadball. But then when Joel and I were randomly talking, he said, "Hey, I want to do a baseball comic." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, I actually started writing one, and he's like, I want to call it Deadball, and I want it to take place during the Deadball era. And I'm like, okay, my story's in the modern times, and then he's like, "I think it'd be cool to use carnies in it, So I'm like, okay. And like, it clicked so fast. Like, that story came together so quick, because my original idea was to have a modern baseball player that had a gruesome injury and his career cut short, and some big corporate company comes to him with some secret medicine to heal him, basically, but it gives him some additional powers, or makes him stronger, whatever, right? And then he has people coming after him because he has this technology in him that never existed before. So then when we talked about Deadball, I'm like, I can actually take that and shift it to the 1900s, and instead of a corporate company, it can be the carnies, like the carnival that's coming after him and that healed him. So I just thought you might appreciate the story because you're a baseball guy. Like, there was no talks about it, and we both wanted a baseball comic, and then it was born. I think it's a pretty cool story, but
yeah, I'm very excited for that one. I'm definitely going to pick it up, and the art looks cool, and I dig the Deadball era. Like, there's a mystique to it because there were multiple leagues operating at that time. You had the American, the National, and there was actually another league in there just beforehand. I forget what it was called, but and obviously the Negro leagues, where it was a segregated time, and they just, the popularity of the sport, the newspapers, the machine, like it was America's game, you know, and it was popular. It just continued to grow in popularity through, you know, Mickey Mantle and, you know, the 60s, and in New England, obviously in 75 with Carlton Fisk, you know, waving it over. And Louis Tmnt, and, you know, I mean, nowadays baseball like is not as popular with the young folks, but I'm not a young folk, and I played Little League, and I played all the way through college, and, you know, into college. I didn't finish it in college. I played a couple of years and started getting comic work. So I was like, I'm going to draw my pictures. But as far as number of baseball fans, I know Mr. Ron Mars is a big Mets fan. If you follow him on Twitter, he is always commenting on their decisions in games, and, you know, it was funny. Like I also follow the Bruins and the Red Sox, so like when I comment on stuff like that, I have found that my audience on Twitter is not a sports audience. So like those tweets usually get left by the wayside, and things like that.
I have the game up right now, so that's why just to see what the Sox are doing. So that's how geek out I am. So yeah,
Joel and I both have the MLB pass, I think, right? Didn't you get that too, Joel?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool, especially this time of year with the playoff chases and things like that's awesome. So you can see every game, all the out of market games and everything. So it's fun, and so, it's perfect for my ADD because you know, if I'm working on something, I'm drawing something, I can't really focus on a movie, right? So I can listen to it, but I'm missing the visual. But I can put the game on, and I can look up in the upper corner there and see the little score box and know exactly where things are at. So it just fulfills my ADD perfectly, where I can be engaged with something else. But, you know, it's either that or it's an audio book or a podcast. It's kind of what occupies my time for my entertainment portion, but it's hard for me to do movies and series just because of the way my mind works and working on things. Yeah, it's hard.
And I also like minor league baseball. My brother worked in it for a period of time, and I don't know. I'm not a wealthy guy, so I like being able to go see professional baseball. That's a fun game, and you get a ticket, you get a hot dog and a beverage for under, you know, $50, and you can barely get in the front gate at a lot of places for that, especially. Right. You know, Fenway Park, you got to know somebody, and, you know.
Yeah. Well, Joel knows.
Play. Yeah, so
you did?
Was he like? Yeah, was he with like the New Jersey Mudhawks or whatever? I don't know. There was some weird name. Right, so, yeah.
Wow.
I saw John Smoltz pitch for the Paw Sox. You know, when he was with the Red Sox for that tiny moment. Like I said, if I can get tickets and he's pitching, I'm gonna go. Because I'm going to go see a Hall of Fame pitcher, even if he's at the end. I want to go see.
Who cares? Joel knows this, I think. I'm a pretty diehard fantasy sports player too, so I do fantasy baseball. So I follow prospects. Anytime that like there was a big name prospect coming to Fisher-Cat Stadium, I'm like, I need to go to that game. And I had more fun at those games, like you said, like because I would get right down behind home plate. I mean, those tickets were cheaper than bleacher seats at Fenway. And I saw Vlad Guerrero Jr. I'm trying to think of names before that, like Benintendi and Moncada when they were supposed to be the next big thing on the Red Sox, and neither one are here anymore. But like I had so much fun, like just getting that close to the field and seeing the game up close like that. And that's 10 minutes away, 15 minutes away, right? I mean, Fenway, I got to drive into Boston, but.
It's a different thing. It's a different experience. Like the first game I went to was at McCoy Stadium for a Paw Sox game when I was little, and it was actually when primetime was coming up with the Yankees, and I got to see Dion before he ever played in the MLB. But I'm like 4 years old, so I don't know what that means, and I don't remember it. But my dad's like, no, it was cool. You got to see it.
We used to go to Florida every year for vacation, and before like 9/11 and all this security wasn't tight, and we would go to we didn't go to the Sox camp because we stayed in like the Orlando Kissimmee area, but we would go to the Astros camp, and the team would be just like mixing in with the fans. Like they would be going from field to field, and they'd stop, and like I remember like Lance Berkman from the Astros like I bought this like 6-foot Louisville Slugger wooden bat to have all the players sign. Cool. And he was sitting there taking practice swings with it, and like a couple of the teammates were coming up picking on him, saying he still couldn't hit an outside pitch, like stuff like that. Like it was just like memories, you know. Like Jimmy Williams, the old Red Sox coach, he was coaching the Astros at that point, and I got my picture taken with him. He was asking if I was a ball player, and I was saying, yeah, that's my dream to play baseball, and he's like, keep working at it, blah blah blah. And then the next year, he was still there before he got fired, and he like signed my picture, and I just have so many memories from baseball. So it's cool to be able to bring it to the comic world.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of hard work, but then like I was fortunate enough to play with some guys that got drafted and played in the minors and stuff like that. When you see them play, it's a lot different than when the rest of us were playing. Like they were just like head and shoulders above. It was when one of the regular guys like me were on the mound, you're throwing in the low 80s. When a regular high 70s, low 80s for your pitches, and then when the next guy steps up, he's pumping 96 without even trying hard. So it's like they're different physical human beings, I think.
I have some embarrassing stories from when I played baseball. My dad, like, we were good in our town, my brother and I. But we weren't even the best kids on our own team. We were one of the better players, but we didn't stand out in a small town. You know what I mean? And he wanted us to be professional baseball players, so he was taking us to like MLB tryouts and stuff. And holy crap, like, just like you said, they're different species, man. Like we were lucky if we saw a breaking ball in high school in my town. Like, we played small schools, and like 75 would have been a fastball that we would see. So we get up there, and first time using a wooden bat, and they're throwing like 90 miles an hour and breaking, 90 miles an hour and breaking balls, and I'm like, I was happy to make contact. And then we get out, and they have us doing 40-yard sprints, racing like one other person. And they put me up against this like tall, lanky kid, and he looked so unathletic. I'm like, oh, thank you, I got this. Like, I'm fast. He freaking destroyed me. I'm like, I'm done. Yeah. And then they give you like your little report card thingy at the end of it all, and they comped me to Alex Cora, not as a coach, as a baseball player. Which, if anyone knows his baseball career, he was a utility man that wasn't really a starter, and that was kind of deflating, but I guess that was a compliment, after knowing how poorly I did. But
hey, yeah, I mean, if you can hang on in the majors for a number of years, I'm sure Mr. Cora made a fair living as a utility man. Or what was the job that everybody always said they wanted was bullpen catcher, so that you could be at all the games.
I was a catcher when I played. I was like, that's a sweet gig, right? You get to tour and travel, and they win, you get a ring, right? You don't have to like have the stress of the media. Like, perfect. I get to go to every game. Be the dream gig. Because I was a catcher when I played. That's what I was doing.
There you go.
Yeah, right. That was the move, right? That's a good deal.
Yeah. Now, did you have the two-piece mask, or was it when they started using the one-piece?
I think I just had the old school. I mean, this is like probably late 80s, man. I played up
until
so
like the skull cap and the two-piece.
Had to be skull cap at that point.
Yeah. Then I found punk and metal bands, and that was the end of my baseball career. So I was a drummer. I was always the guy that wanted to be in the background, sitting down. I didn't want to run around or anything. So let the guitarist be up front. I'll be in the back, guy just sitting squatting here. So catcher, drummer kind of makes the same sense, right, in my mind. So
and also they're the thinkers. They're the thinkers, the catchers.
Yeah, the catchers have to. Yeah, you're calling the game right there.
I had a good snap throw to first, man. I could really fire it over there, so it's a good move. My dad told me early, throw it off your ear. That's what he told us. So that was my move, right?
My dad's biggest mistake was that I write lefty, I draw lefty. He taught me to throw righty. Just like, I don't know what it was. I mean, he used to make the joke that I look like an idiot throwing my left hand, but I just think he didn't know how to teach because he threw righty, But I mean, you could be a little bit lower in the skill set, and if you're a lefty pitcher, that's going to give you a leg up on most people, because they covet those lefty arms. But
for sure.
Yeah, but
I mean, the Red Sox had many a lefty specialist that would come in and face one batter.
Yeah. Granted, I could never. My brother could probably hit 90. I couldn't come close to that. But I played left field and broke my sternum my senior year. So it was all south after that. Every time I'd swing the bat, I'd hear a pop in my chest. So. Anyways.
Was it diving for a ball or something?
Yep. And I caught it at least, but it was a diving catch in the outfield. And I remember feeling that as soon as it hit, I felt this like like sensation in my chest, and
It's the worst.
just like,
I've done that.
but the adrenaline of the catch, because it ended the inning too. So I'm like running to the dugout all excited, and like once I was sitting in the dugout, I'm like, ooh, that doesn't feel right.
It was trying to
And
make
then
you laugh. You're like,
yeah. Next
don't
time
make
I
me
go to
laugh.
bat, first swing, I'm like, oh. And to this day, like I can pop my chest because I didn't go to the doctor until after the season because it was my senior year, and I'm like, I just want to play. I don't want to miss games.
Wow.
And I went to the doctor, and they did an X-ray, and he's like, yeah, you cracked your sternum. It's broken.
Not much you can do. Tape you up, probably.
Well, they would have just said don't swing a bat, and I would have
sure.
said I don't want to miss my last year of baseball, but.
Yeah.
I'm sure it didn't really help my hitting that year because it hurt every time I swung. But
and now
totally
we're
gonna
all
go back.
making comics.
Yeah, I'm gonna totally go back to comics. This story
yes.
might have been a story. Sorry about our tangent. That's what we do.
Yeah, I enjoy it.
I don't know. Me too. I don't know if this story was ever told, but did you ever find out, or did anybody ever tell why on Tick 8 there was no Tick logo on the meteorite striking off his head cover variant? I actually have it on my wall back here if you need the reference to see that.
I have a person I can ask. I'm sure he's asleep by now, but that is one that I can find out for you for sure. I don't know, to be honest.
It was like a variant before a variant, right? So it's kind of a thing. Like this is like 91 probably.
Yeah, well, NEC did a few things. Like there's the white background special edition 1, and then there's the black background, which is technically the mass market first one. So they did one that was directly to retailers first. So that's considered a variant. But what they also did, and this was a practice, and I don't know if you guys are doing it with your company, is they did ash cans. So they would do inexpensively printed smaller versions of the comics and have them at signings or shows. And like back then it was just to show off like this is the next book that's coming out or whatever. But now people look at those as like, oh, well, that's like before the first appearance. Like this actually has the first Arthur, not the issue 2 that, that's the issue 2 ash can with the pink cover or whatever. And once it got into the 90s with like Big Blue Destiny and some of the other books, they were fully like leaning in with like die cut covers and different stuff. And they really did do like the variant cover thing for a little while. Nowadays, like they pretty much will take the free comic book day issue, and then there's one story in that's usually the special issue that they use for the conventions, and for different shows they'll do different covers for those shows. But it won't it almost is never put into Diamond as like here's like Dynamite usually has like 12 covers for their issue 1, that they'll just have those available to everyone based on the amount you order or whatever. So,
that's cool.
Yeah, they always.
I don't know the cover you're
stuff.
talking about, Joel. Sorry, you don't need to show me that cover. I don't.
Get it. Yeah, hold on. I'll stop.
Oh, you don't. Yeah, if you want.
I'll go get it. Yeah, let me grab it.
On what you were saying with the ash can, though, we had to make a decision for the con because Mercurio, which it was the right decision because he's still not quite done. He's almost done doing the art for Deadball, but we were like, all right. We want something for Deadball on our table, and it doesn't look like it's going to line up timing-wise with shipping and all that. So we have, and hopefully it's here in time. They said it should be, but we have an ash can coming for Deadball. It's the first half of the book, basically. We wanted to show off, so.
Yeah. But you're using it in like the traditional sense of here's what's coming. We want to show you a preview, and let's get you excited to buy it.
So as far as I know, this has not been opened since like 1991. So I'm curious to see if the Red Eye mini comic is still in here. It probably is because I was a neurotic kid like that and kept everything.
You're gonna open it right now for the first time?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I haven't opened this in like 30 years, but
it's touching up.
It isn't there. There you go.
Yeah,
it's still there. There you go. Like the ash can. To your point, it's still in there. Right. It's stapled in, but I never pulled it out.
And sometimes you'll see just that book out in the wild, like in a dollar bin or bagged and boarded, the mini comic, and it was. And I love that kind of stuff. I like things that add to the comic experience. Like on the first issue of Helena, I put a pull-out poster in the middle, so like you can take out the poster and it doesn't affect the story. But because of like how comics are so collectible, I don't know if anyone has like, or they perceive it as a collectible. I don't know if anyone's torn it out and tacked it up on the wall yet or anything.
Yeah, they just leave
It
it in.
smells 30
Yeah.
years old too. I'll tell you that much. It smells like,
That's cool though. Yeah, but that's the best.
yeah, but look at the homage to EC. So even at a
Oh
young
yeah.
age, it was drawn to that style, right? So it's literally been with me forever, and I just love that stuff. All my EC stuff's on my wall over here too. But that's cool, man, because I haven't opened that forever. But you can see they didn't do the logo, and this was considered the variant too. So.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
I'll ask. And they also did a book called Tales Too Terrible to Tell. And that was, it had a very EC cover. Steve Bissette did a cool zombie cover on the first issue. And it had one new story, and then they did reprints of like some Golden Age stuff in there. So like if you ever see those in like the $2 magazine bin at a show, just snap those up because they're a lot of fun.
Yeah, and like you said, George Suarez is still on there, right? All the title is still on
Oh
there.
yeah, Bob Polio, George Suarez, you know, and I actually just talked to Mr. Garcia the other day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Has Chainsaw Vigilante come up in any of your books? I haven't read all of them, but I didn't know if he was in there.
He's only been on one cover that I've done, and I've wanted to use him and stuff, but they're kind of hesitant to overuse him because I don't know, like you know, you don't want to keep using the same gimmick for everything over and over again. It's kind of also like we talked about, like they don't want to have him yelling spoon all the time. You know, it wears it out. So they try to use it for like really important story moments or right before like the conclusion to an arc or something. You know, it's something that they're conscious of, and they try to, because this is something that comes up is like when you do get to work on like an intellectual property that you like I think the overwhelming direction people go is like, well, I want to do my version of this story that I loved as a kid, or I want to take this story and say something about it, rather than like coming up with like, this is a new direction that we want to go in. And not necessarily that the publisher wants to go in a new direction. They want you to use the stuff that sells and makes things happen. And like with certain things, especially when I first got on, I was like, oh God, we gotta have Chainsaw Vigilante, because like the Xander Cannon miniseries of that is beautiful. I don't know if you've ever seen those.
Yeah,
like he had such a different style, and it was all ink brush, and like his Kaiju Max book story right now, it's just like it's firing on all cylinders. He's just he's just gone on to do so much great stuff, and he's a guy who has won awards, done like tons of other stuff. And when I first met him at a show, he couldn't have been nicer, and he introduced me to his work, and you know, I again, it just goes back to, what do you do at a show? Like you introduce someone to your work, and I buy his work whenever I see it at a store. Like it's not just that it's good, it's that he turned out to be like a really nice guy. So
right. Like, I've done a lot of times at cons. I've just picked up books because the guy was cool and rapped with me for like 20 minutes, you know, and it's like, sure, I'll get your book. Like I don't know anything about it, but it's cool, right? So I've done that a lot. So a lot of books like that. Yeah. It's good stuff. Yeah, that was fun though. That just, you know, I still have that, and I've opened it in that time, so it's good to reminisce of that stuff. It's fun.
Yeah. But if on my account, you know, it lost some of its 9.8 freshness.
I don't care about that. You know, it's ironic you say that. I'm trying to build the most nappy collection of pre-Uncanny X-Men that I can. Like trying to get like 0.05 or worse. Like the only requirement's got to have a complete story and like at least a mostly intact cover. Other than that, all rules are off. So just so I can have a ratty collection, just so it's for fun, you know.
I enjoy hearing that, because I'm a beat but complete motto guy. Like I've been a dollar bin guy my whole life, never had a ton of money, but I love reading. So it's like, you know, as long as it's there, and I prefer it with a cover, like you said, but I've bought coverless comics for like a quarter before, sure. Yeah.
Now I'm in the EC fan club on Facebook, and there's guys that will specifically put up like they try to go out of their way to find like a weird science run that has no cover. Like that's their move, is to have a coverless run of the whole thing. And some of the guys have pulled it off, and I'm like, that's kind of cool too. So just to have these weird, unique variations of your collection. But I did buy a 9.8 the other day. I got just because I love Alex Ross, but I picked this up. That's an awesome
one.
The Alex Ross cover of Silver Surfer for the Torch.
Oh, I don't think I knew that came in the mail. I know you sent me the picture when you got it, but I didn't know you got it already in hand. That's cool.
Yeah, I stole this thing. Awesome. This is the benefit of sleeping 4 hours a night. This was like a 3:12 a.m. purchase, and I got it for less than it would be to grade the thing.
Wow.
So I was like hell yeah, it's like, let's just get that thing, so yeah, it's awesome. I'm a huge Alex Ross fan, so it just looks cool. I'll put it up on the wall here and it looks nice, so keeps me company in the studio.
He does beautiful work, and he's one of those artists who has the appeal to people outside of comics, because even when I was a kid, my parents would see whether it was Kingdom Come or Marvel and say, like, that's really nice, and they would look at it and engage with it.
It can be real art.
Yeah. That and Wally comics, right?
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, like I guess he has a whole like production setup, man. Like, he's like got models on the call. He makes like 3D models of stuff, like just to get the angles right. I mean, he's really like sets up like light booths and things, and does the photography, then works from that and builds up in like gouache or watercolor or something, and just God bless him, ton of work.
Yeah, and he goes and he creates those cinematic type of looks, and I don't generally like to use that word because I don't think comics are movies on paper. Like, I think they're their own thing. They have similar qualities, but because of the way the panels work together and the things you can do in comics, being able to see different moments in time at the same time, like saying that that's like a movie, I don't necessarily works, but I think that he goes for that aperture, and he goes for that sort of like trying to disguise that it is even a drawing. And that's something that I mentioned online the other day, was that like sometimes it's okay if it is something, but you also know that it's a drawing. And like those very graphic style artists like Toth, like Jack Davis, like you look at a Jack Davis, like it's a drawing, but it is beautiful, and it is especially his later work is usually pretty funny. And Sergio Aragonés, like you can know it's a drawing and know what it is abstracting and meaning, and still have its storytelling effectiveness without hiding that it's a drawing. And you can also go the other way, like the Alex Ross, and create a beautiful thing. Like that's the range. Like
I think it's all about how it fits it's all about how it fits the story too. I mean, with Alex Ross, it's mostly covers, but like the art style of who's drawing the sequential art, themselves, right? It's like Jeff Lemire, like his art is, very animated. I mean, it's not Alex Ross where it looks so realistic, right? But it fits his stories. Or Gabriel Rodriguez, like it's more of a cartoony look almost, but it works. It works for what he's doing. So in the story that they're telling. So I guess that kind of goes back to what you said earlier, where it's this harmony, right, of the artist and the story, how it all fits together. So
totally, yeah. I mean, I one of my favorite teams of the last few years in mainstream comics was the Wade Samney stuff, like whether it was Captain America or they did Daredevil for a period of time. They did I had not bought a Black Widow comic in years, but when I follow creators usually, and when they did it, it was tremendous. Just the pacing, the way he draws. He draws with heavy contrast, heavy ink work, and it is graphical, and it is very much a storytelling element that relies on your light source and everything, and moving the eye through the page with the well spotted black ink throughout the whole thing. And that working, like we talked about earlier, organically with the lettering to make this, harmonious page. And when you read it, it functions as a single piece. You're not distracted by the lettering. You're not distracted by the art being too flashy from the story. To me, it just works. And I love when it's that feeling that you get with like no other thing. Like you can read a great novel, you can see a great movie, but I don't know, for me, when you see art functioning like that, it's just like, it's the best.
I mean, I came into this wanting to be a novelist, right? Like I wanted to write, and when Joel came to me to work on a comic, I didn't know anything. I mean, if you saw the first script I sent him, it's embarrassing because it was just me copy and pasting from the novel version. Basically, it was all prose, and it was like I think page one should end here, and it's like he would draw the panels, and it was a mess, as far as process. But I fell in love with comics again when I started doing it. I was out of reading comics for years, so I read them as a kid, my whole childhood, but I fell in love with the structure of it more, and how it is, just this perfect mix of, you said, you don't view it like a movie, I just feel like this perfect mix of movie and prose, writing prose, where you're almost I don't know the right word, but like not directing it like a film director, but like there's just Rogerios, he's still watching even though he can't connect with us. Sorry if I said anything bad about you, Rogerio. I didn't know you were still watching.
Nothing but bad things. We only say bad things.
Yeah. But I just fell in love with the whole concept of it all, and how the artwork and the writing mix together, and it's just, I don't know. I could see where, like, I know I saw an interview with Joe Hill where he said, you know, if he didn't want to challenge himself to write novels, he would do comics all day long, because he loves the camaraderie of working with an artist. He loves just the whole process of putting his words to images, and I've had a blast, you know, putting it all together with Joel here at Livid. So,
Joel, had you done other comics before? Because I mean, it's a pre-question to my next question.
Okay. Nothing on this scale, just stuff in school with classmates and having my Xerox copies out of work, you know, behind the scenes when the boss wasn't paying attention, I could sell for a nickel between classes to kids. You know, kind of thing.
So when the box of jewels showed up, that was the moment?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
I think I commented, I said, you know, the two happiest moments are when the book arrives and when you also ship it out to people or get it to people, right? I think those are the two best moments in the creator's life, right? It's just, it's done, here you go. And that's real, right?
When he got the first because we had an issue, or we had 10 copies of Jewel 1 sent as like a promo, just to check them, make sure there was no issues with the bleeds and all that. And when he got them, I'm like, man, I'm gonna drive. He lives an hour away from me. I'm like, I'm driving to your house. Like, I want that in my hands right now, you know. And we used to joke, even if we didn't sell our books, like, we could say we did it, right? Like, I can sit here and say, like, I have this in my hands. Like, this is the first thing that we ever created, you know. Even if we had to give them out for Christmas gifts for 10 years, you know, we have it. So I don't know. Yeah, I still think I'll feel that on every print that comes, but that first one definitely was special.
Were there cigars involved? Was it a dinner out? Was there a toast at least?
You know,
unfortunately,
the funny thing that we wanted to do, but it's obviously hard to get cast right now, is my wife and I wanted to recreate the scene in Back to the Future when George McFly, as the adult, gets his first novel, and like Biff's out there waxing the car. We totally wanted to do a parody, but I'm like, I don't know if I can pull that off. But it was kind of that moment, and she's super supportive, so it was fun. I don't think we do anything too crazy, just the excitement of opening it. You know, we're kind of homebodies these days. I'm on my little microcosm out here in my farm, and we enjoy just being out here and maybe go outside and pick some fruits and have that as a party. So it's pretty simple living out here in the country.
But as far as like you and I, like when I went to get the copies, like but there should have been a cigar or a toast, but no, I had my kids with me.
A cigar, dude. Like,
that's true. I should have said, hey, can I take one of those? But no, I had my 7-year-old and 3-year-old with me. I just was like, guys, my wife was working. I'm like, we're going to see Joel. And I told them how long we were going to be in the car. They weren't thrilled with me, but yeah, it was pretty quick that first trip to get those copies. I wish we took the time to. I think I did have a beer with you actually, but
I think I forced
it upon you. Yeah. It was a good moment. It's fun, and I think the pencils for Yule 2 will be done next week. So that's
awesome.
Going at a much faster pace. We got the process down. We got some new gear and things, right? That makes things.
We're on the last page now, right?
Yeah, but halfway through the last page. So
yeah.
Trying to, doing that with everything else.
Yeah.
So Ian, what are you currently working on? That's a good segue to that. So tell us what's going on. What's on your art table right now?
On my art table right now is some stuff I can't talk about, but stuff that I can talk about is like
does it sound like blooper band or like incredible joke?
Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah. No.
All right.
No, but I'm working with some of my close friends on that stuff, and I'm sure I'll post it up. But I'm doing the next issue of the Acts of Helena stuff, which is my creator-owned stuff, which I do, regular stuff during the day, working at night on my own stuff, but I still have that schedule where you're burning it a little on both ends because you love doing it. And it's, the next issue is the Land of Monsters, and it's like drawing any kind of monster I feel like in this giant quest, and it's a double-sized issue, and it's sword and sorcery, which I was, my dad exposed me to it way too early, but I just fell in love with it, and I read all the R.E. Howard books and the Tolkien books and the Elric books, any of that stuff. Like, I read all of that. I read all the fantasy and science fiction stuff, as a kid. But like I can draw the mechanical stuff, but I had to pick something I could do, like you said, when you're exhausted and you're still happy to do it. And for me, that's not drawing cars. For me, that's drawing like, I'm happy to draw, like horses are tough, but like I'm happy to draw, horses, monsters, people with swords killing monsters. Like I can do that when I'm exhausted and still have a blast. So like that was kind of why I went in that direction with like the current creator-owned stuff. Like we all have I'm sure you and John both have a million ideas for other books that you want to do and stories you want to do, but figuring out what you can do and when you can do it, it makes it a little bit, you have to make your decisions. So like, until a time comes when I can, have enough Substack readers or something else to support, a book that has more mechanical drawings and things like that in it. I think I'll be doing like the fantasy, the outer space elements. Like that's the fun stuff for me. And I've gotten a couple of calls. I talked to NEC today, but they, are pretty tight-lipped about what they want to do for next year. There was mention of comics. I will say that, but I'll do my best to promote. And again, like you guys are a company now, that you're doing all the promotion, you're doing all the getting the message out, all the platforms under the sun, and then a new one starts and you download it and put it on your phone, and dear God, there goes my credit card. I envy the gusto that you guys are going forth with all the different platforms right away with your first stuff. So
well, Twitter was not even like, we didn't even look at Twitter till about a couple months ago. Basically, I mean, we had it, but like I think we had 12 followers for the first handful of months because we just didn't even look at it. And but yeah, I mean, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, like we're trying to push them, but it's that like fine line of trying to figure out, like Joel's working on Yule 2. Rogério's working on Deadball 1. We're prepping for the con. We're gonna have to do another Kickstarter soon. We haven't even started like setting that up yet. And then we're doing the show now, so like we're trying to promote our guests. And it's like all of our friends on social media that don't follow us for comic stuff are probably like, man, these guys just don't stop. But
yeah, somebody told me to post more interesting content. I was like, I think I put up a post like, is anybody seeing this? And the guy says, yeah, I see you. You just don't post any interesting content.
Oh, jeez.
Like, wow. Tough
Stone cold.
Yeah. Well, when you when you said, you guys must have a ton of ideas, that you can't, like, I don't know if you can even see this with this, but all this, like, this is just mostly ideas of stuff that I want to do at some point, like whether it's novel or comics. But like, yeah, it's a matter of putting it together. I think the reason we agreed on Deadball is because it just seemed like the stars aligned, where we both came to each other basically wanting to do a baseball book, right? And we're like, all right, well, that's the next project, because clearly that's a sign, but there's just
serendipitous.
Yeah, it's not enough days or not enough hours in the day to do what we need to do when we have the day job still. But
we had some other creators connecting with us, maybe do some projects with them. So that's another thing. It's like, where do we fit them in? Because we do want to do things with them, right? So it's trying to do that. Like anthologies are not off the table, so that's another thing too. It's like all kinds of stuff going on. So
I think I mentioned to you.
How do you release it?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it to you at the show. If I can help, give me a call. You know how to get in touch with me. So
yeah, man. Yeah, definitely. Yep. When you're not doing comics, what do you like to do, Ian, outside of this world? Like when you get outside and get to run around, what do you like to do?
I have forced myself to, like, one of the big stress relievers is just going for a jog and exercising, and it's tough for when you sit at a desk all day, pulling yourself away and deadline stuff. But I've really tried to make that more of a priority. And I got back to fishing. Like, I used to go fishing all the time. And, even if I only get to go once every couple of weeks to the pond up the street and catch 3 bluegill, it's
that's awesome.
It's something just to relieve the stress and get out of the house.
Right.
But and especially in the current, times where it's like, well, do you go to a big concert with 1 million people? Do you go to a big indoor thing? And I'm a cautious guy because, if I go down, then, that's everything stops. If I get sick, everything stops. And,
Sure.
It's when you're doing stuff, you want to just keep the things rolling. And are you guys fishermen as well, or do you take the kids fishing?
My youth, I loved it. And I bought this house in August, and there is a 350-acre lake reservoir a mile from my house. So a bass boat is definitely in my future. Like nothing crazy, man. I'm talking like some old from somebody's camp, like some $300 maybe used dinged up thing that I'll just row out there, no motor on it, and I might do that next year. So I think that's definitely on the agenda. But the kids, my kids are 4, 6, and 8, and they've been said, "Dad, take us fishing," and it's such a cool network out here. There's even like a little neighborhood farm guy that has a man-made pond on his property, and he stocks it. So he's like, "Guys want to come up here and fish? Go right ahead." And that'd be kind of cool because I don't need a license either at that point because it's private property. So yeah, I definitely want to get back to that. So it's on my radar for next year. I think we'll try to fit that in. So
I definitely. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Ian said fishing, and then Brian last time said fishing too. So it's got like this whole fishing thing going on with it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool.
Hey, it is relaxing. I mean, I definitely fished a lot more as a kid. Like my dad took us all the time. We had a brook out behind our house, so we would go like fishing for rainbow trout, and we would go bass fishing. Like we had a boat. Again, nothing fancy, but we had a boat, so we'd go do that, horn pouting, stuff like that. But my son loves it. He's only been probably 3 or 4 times. We try to go at least once a summer. And we were up in Maine for vacation at the end of August, and we got a day pass for saltwater fishing. And unfortunately, we didn't get any bites. But like my father-in-law brought his saltwater, his poles for saltwater fishing, and his all his stuff for that, right? And we still had a blast. We sat there and fished for a couple hours, and it was just relaxing. My son almost hooked me a few times because his casting's terrible, but he loves it. We have some of my favorite pictures of him are when he was like 3 years old, and my father-in-law and I took him fishing, and he caught like a little tiny fish, and he was holding it up, and he went to grab it and it started doing the flappy things, and he's screaming, and we took pictures of it. It was those pictures are priceless. He still remembers me changing his diaper on a rock out in the woods when he was like 2.5. It must have been actually before 3. He was potty trained at 3, so he must have been like 2.5 when I took him fishing for the first time. So long-winded answer, but yes.
Well, since everybody's into fishing and you have this company, I think there is like a completely tax-deductible fishing trip to talk comics in our future at some point.
There you go.
Tax deduction. So that's
yeah.
We could do that. Yeah, put a Comic Con fishing derby together. All right, there could be an angle, right?
I think
you
so.
could have done it down at the Everett Arena there in Concord when you were out there, right? They have the river right there. They could have made that part of their. I'll have to talk to Little Giant about that for next year's shows. Have a fishing competition.
There you go. Yeah. We're lucky enough to be close to each other. You're probably our first guest that's been, within an hour and a half drive of us. Most of the guests have been all around the world or country, so. Definitely.
Yeah, I've got family up in Concord, so I'd have
no kidding.
Crash.
All right, that's cool.
Yep, I had some good friends that were Nichols in the area, so maybe you're probably related. So
somewhere back in the day.
Yeah, probably so. Yep, that's awesome. Yeah.
Well,
yeah, like you said earlier too. It's important to get out as comic creators and try to exercise. That's a big thing too, right? It's hard to stay in shape, and especially everything so inside right now, and trying to fit all that in with your time too is like, when do I spend a half hour going for a run or take the bike out or do anything like that, and try to juggle that into everything else. It's important.
That's the thing. Yeah, I thought when I was working from home I'd be the opposite, where I'd be like, oh, I'm exercising all the time. Like the other side of this wall is my treadmill and weights and all that. I've touched them twice in the past 18 months. Whereas when I was driving to the office every day, I was going to the gym almost every single day. I was running 2 or 3 miles 4 or 5 times a week, and I don't think I could run a mile right now. It's definitely, and part of it is the extra time is now I have a second thing I'm doing. I had all that other time before where I would play PlayStation or exercise or watch movies, and now if I sit down on the couch, I like look over at my laptop and I'm like, I should probably write right now. But so it's that balance.
I mean, you'll find the things that also help you to be more productive in your hours, like working out, fishing, that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, it is time away, but it also like it energizes the time I'm on. So it makes it so that I'm fresher. It reduces the stress, just getting it out, so I can go back to the grind. And when I'm able to grind, it's better and more productive. So it
when
doesn't
you're
work for
fishing,
everybody.
but when you're fishing though, do you find yourself just letting go and like not thinking of everything, or do you, because like with me, the way my brain works, like I would be there like picturing the story in my head while I'm sitting there casting. Like I just don't know if I could separate it for those few hours and just let it go. At least now. I mean, I know we're early on. Maybe eventually we'd get to that point, but.
Well, I mean, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's doing something with your kiddos or something where you have to like detach or something. I don't know. Like it works for me, but I'm sure that everybody else will have their own thing. So and you guys are just starting out, so these are some of the things you're gonna figure out as you go. I mean,
yeah.
You ever find yourself sitting down having like artist block, or sometimes you feel like
oh,
you
hell
got
yeah.
something, but you can't get it? Okay, all right, good.
Hell yeah.
Some guys we've talked to said, no, never, I've got it. It's like, really? Like, okay.
I hate those people. Yeah. No. I also hate the people that like they post these things that are supposedly warm-ups. No, bullshit. You drew that over the weekend and you just posted it this morning.
I see that all the time now. Yeah, I see that all over social media. This is my warm-up of Moon Knight, and I'm like, that freaking must have taken forever. Like,
like I know some fast artists, some really fast artists, but like, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah, I get artist block. But I always tend to find, because I do write my own stuff a fair amount, is that the writing will get me out of the artist block. Like I'll go back to story and where I need to go rather than how it needs to look. And sometimes it'll work the other way too, where I can think about how it's going to look, and then that'll help the story. I generally don't think of any sort of like visual gimmick before the story. I'll write a plot with like major dialogue, and then I'll reshape that. If it's a longer arc, I start with an outline. I don't know if you do outlines for everything.
Oh
yeah. And it's so you know where to go, A to B to C to D, and then it also lets you look at the character arcs and where things go from a macro perspective. And then I'll take that, and usually when I have the dialogue and the plot, that's when I thumbnail, and then I actually write the script from the plot, dialogue, and thumbnails, because then I know how much space I have for the dialogue and everything else, like wherever the places where I can put boxes and what real estate needs to happen. And that's why when you like look at my thumbnails, like I think you saw them in one of my binders where I even number the speech bubbles as I'm going through. So you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, and that way they're in order. People are speaking in order. You're not having the person on the right speak before the person on the left. Little things like that. You can work them out before you ever get to the larger pieces. And I know some people are able to just go right into the script, but I was an artist before I was a writer. So it was like using one to inform the other was how we both got to the finish line.
Yeah.
One of the things we ran into on Yule was like, you draw the whole panel, then you realize that 40% of it's covered with text. So it's like,
yeah.
Right. So now when I thumb it out like that, to your point, I sit there and I actually put the speech balloons in while I'm doing it. Cause I'm like, okay, I don't have to do anything there. So that saves me a ton of time, which is great. Yeah. So
I guess that's the key difference. Like when you're doing it all yourself is I'm not drawing it. So I try my best to think, all right, that's too much text for that bubble. Like it's going to take up too much space or like, so I try to think of that now. I mean, with you one, again, we were learning as we went, but yeah, I usually now that I have a process, I'll do notes on my phone or whatever, then I'll do like a rough outline, then I'll go back and like kind of revise it, and then put like breaks between certain areas of the outline, saying like, okay, this is going to cover this portion of the book, second portion, third portion, and then I'll start to do a rough draft of the script where I'm like, okay, well, I know the first third of the book is going to cover this, so I need to fit this into X amount of pages and try to figure out where the page reveal is going to be, and if there's going to be one, or if there's a splash page, and stuff like that. So, and then I usually do a couple drafts of the script itself before I try to pass it off. That's what I did with Deadball. So I feel like that's a good process. I don't know what's the norm in the industry, if there even is one, but it definitely feels right to me, going that way.
I mean, for mainstream comics, a lot of people follow the DC Guide to Writing Comics. That was a book that came out a number of years ago when Klaus Janson was doing the drawing book, and I think Paul Levitz was involved. But like the process of getting to the script, like getting to that endpoint, like it varies greatly. Because like, I don't know, are you guys familiar with Harvey Picar's work, American Splendor?
I've heard of it. I don't know it. I wouldn't know it enough, but
yeah, he was an independent creator who was an underground artist, underground writer, and had worked with Robert Crumb, Steve Zabel, Gary Dumm, like a bunch of artists out of Cleveland. And he started writing. He wrote articles for the newspaper and things like that. But he would do stick figures, just to show himself as he was going. And then there are people like. Grant Morrison, he draws out the script himself, like as he's going. So like, there's this vast range of, different ways to get where you're going. But in the end, they're all trying to figure out what to put in the real estate. So whatever gets you to that point, knowing the action, knowing the inset, knowing the timing, the pacing, the space between panels. I mean, however you get there, like it'll be your way. But like, I remember getting my first like professional script. There was, I think IDW at one time used to publish and just put out scripts, and it was like a completely intellectual property, whether it was CSI or one of these other ones. That was the first time I'd ever gotten like a professional writer's comic book script. And it was very much like panel 1, this dialogue, panel 2, this dialogue, page 1, and it was how you would see in that DC guide, like right along. So like, I have no idea how that writer got to that point, but they got to that point. Like there's, as you know, with like a screenplay, they have a very specific, format that they follow. But I mean, when you submit your writing samples, I'm sure, I don't even know which companies right now. I think Dynamite accepts some samples and things like that. They probably have specific guidelines on their website. Like I just did a panel in Colorado Springs about like where you look for guidelines and submitting, and just make sure that you follow. And they'll all be a little different, like whether you're submitting like a pitch to Image or to SourcePoint or whatever. Like there's not one overarching thing that they all ask for that's necessarily uniform. They'll say, we want 3 sequential pages, an overarching script, a single script, and then you go to the next one, they want 8 pages or they want 12 pages. They all have different ways to ask for them, and
gotcha.
Following those directions, like, is the first test that they give you. Basically, they're like, oh well, if he read the directions, now we can take him seriously.
All right. That's that was one of the biggest things when I started looking, is like I saw so many people saying there is no standard in the comic industry like there is with movie scripts, or everyone has their own style. Like DC has their style, Marvel has theirs. I bought this book to read, and it helped a good amount, but I also did a masterclass with Neil Gaiman. I told you I started doing the Scott Snyder class. Like they all have different ways of doing it, but I'm just trying to take from all of those really and make my own style. Joel, I don't know I don't want to like people to read this necessarily, but this, I just shared the screen there. Like this is kind of how I started doing it. I don't know if you're sharing it yet, Joel. So because I only see the Word doc here, but.
Yeah, do you want the whole thing? Well, here we go with this whole thing.
Yeah, this is Deadball 2, so I don't want to like this is a rough draft of the script. This is the first version, but like I'll do like page 3, 5 panels, and then I'll do it, and then like text bubble, like something like that. So I didn't know if this was normal. I had no idea, but I recently bought the American Vampire trade back, the trade on paperback, and Stephen King wrote a couple of those issues, and they had examples of his script in the back, and it was almost identical to the way I did it. I'm like, okay, well, if Stephen King was doing it this way, I feel like I can stick to this. But yeah, that's just how. Just as an example, if anyone even cares that watches this, what goes into the script creation.
Well, we like
it's a big part of it.
Yeah, we like the IDW put out Eastman's Ninja Turtle Director's Cut.
Yeah.
John and I both got that. That was cool to see process there, how he was doing it back in the day, kind of walk through the thumbs and then the rough drafts and the final. And
yeah, his layouts can be wild.
Yeah, I can't even. I was getting lost looking at
yellow ruled paper, wasn't it? It was on legal pad. It was on legal pad. It's awesome. So it's good stuff.
Well, you guys know why it was called Mirage Studios, right?
Yes, I do.
I don't. I don't. No, I don't know this.
You can tell the story. I know. I'll let you tell it. Then,
Yeah, there was no studio. It was their mom's kitchen table or whatever.
Yep.
Mirage.
Yep. So. That's right. I watched the. Oh, really? That's where the. Is that where the manhole cover is now?
But they want to put the manhole cover there. They want to do a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle manhole cover right in front of where the house was in Durham, New Hampshire. And then timing of this show is kind of ironic that you're on too. This the news came out today that they're going to be winding down Mirage and that the company's going to be dissolved by like the 29th or something.
Yeah, it's the end of an era because, Mirage Turtles comics have been around, my whole life, 1984. So, it's and it's interesting because I've had a couple of friends that did little bits for them towards the end. I never got to do anything for Mirage, but you see the guys around. You'll if you do New England cons, you're gonna see Jim Lawson, Michael Dooney. You'll see these guys around, and I've never had a bad experience saying hi to them. They've all been really nice, and you go up and you're like, I loved your turtle comic when I was a kid, blah blah blah, and they're like, I've heard it a million times, but thank you, you're such a great kid, Yeah. And actually, one of those moments as an artist, like coming up in New England, where I was like, oh, I'm starting to make it, was when it was Eric Talbot was at one of the Boston Comic Cons, and he saw that I had done, I think, this first cover over here, and he asked if I wanted to do an art trade. I was like, whoa, you want to trade some of your work that people like and pay you money for some of my work? That was crazy, and it was like one of those things where I was like, okay, it's starting to work, it's starting to happen, and that was when I was first really starting to come up. And the old Boston Comic Con, that was the first show that I was doing in New England, but I had done like smaller shows out in Ohio, and I actually sought out small shows in this area, and there's a bunch of them, like not just Little Giants, but there's other ones, and like even though you're not getting 100,000 eyeballs like at a New York or whatever, like meeting those people even at the small shows has been invaluable, and they've been huge supporters of me and my friends' work, and I know that every little bit helps. So
yeah, that's with us with the con too, it's obviously we want eyeballs on our product, but we view it almost as much as a networking opportunity, right? Because of all the other creators and some of the bigger names that might be there, and just having a chance to talk to them face to face. So if it is dead, if it is slow, it's like, hey, let's go talk to whoever is at the celebrity table. Like I think Ben Bishop's going to be there. Let's go talk to him for a few minutes. I
think Woodall and Schmalke will be there. They're good guys. They're New Hampshire guys. They do a lot of the shows up there. Say hi to them for sure. I know Rich has done some TMNT covers. I think Schmalke did one as well. They work for Scout Comics. They're really good people. I don't have the full guest list memorized, but I think Craig's going to be there. Craig Russo, he's a great guy. He's done Harley Quinn. He's done all this stuff. Like, just go say hi, introduce yourselves. It's very exciting. It's your first show. I mean, come on.
We're pumped. Yeah, we can't.
Julian Glover's going to be there, right? There you go. Pull up the list. So John Ratzenberger from Cheers, right? He's there. Ray Hassett.
don't know how much he'll help us on the comic side of things, but it'd be cool to talk to him.
just hold up name. Comic creators, Dave Dorman's there. Aaron Leffler, a whole bunch of people. That's a good show. I mean, they put together a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Cool, man.
Yeah, and it's the store Double Midnight. I think they're the guys that that show. Yeah. And they carry indie comics. They support people. They do their own variant covers in the past. They're another store that has helped a lot of creators. So,
I tried to talk to the one in Concord, but it's usually the same kid working every time. I like you said, you got to call ahead if you want to like meet with whoever, right? But he gave me the business card of the guy to get in touch with. He's like, man, I don't even read many comics. I do tabletop games mostly. And I'm like, yeah, but you're the only one that ever works here in the Concord store. He's like, he was saying how he loved the idea of the spinner rack, thing.
I think it's a great idea.
So, but yeah, cool.
Well, I think I'm going to turn into a pumpkin if we're on.
I was just going to say, I think you can feel it. You can feel when it's starting to wind down. I feel like this is a good ending spot here. So,
well, thank you guys so much. Man. It's been real great, and I'm so excited for you. And you're taking your first steps on the journey. And and like I said, if I can help at all, just give me a ring.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
And likewise too. So what we can do, if you got something you want to promote, let us know. We'll hit up our channels and things like that too. So. We're about giving back too. That's really what it's all about, is helping each other out at the end of the day. So that's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's been awesome, man. So it's kind of fulfilling, like I said earlier in the show, my little childhood circle is kind of complete here. So it's kind of fun to be somebody that's making something that got me started on this journey. So thank you very much for your time tonight. We appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. It was great meeting you at the show, and hopefully I'll see you guys at another stop down the tracks.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. You're welcome to hang on after the show if you want. If you got a jet, we totally get it too. But definitely.
I'm gonna fall asleep.
All right, buddy. No worries.
Later,
all right,
man.
guys. We'll see you guys on Wednesday night. Everybody, stay livid.